A very good afternoon to all the esteemed participants and all who have gathered on this online virtual platform. Dear esteemed participants, we are very happy to inform you that we have moved on towards the second day of this 2-day virtual workshop on Jolly Phonics. I hope all of you are finding this workshop very interesting, with the beautiful talk being delivered by Ms. Yvonne Delotto, literacy consultant and synthetic phonics specialist teacher trainer, United Kingdom. We are very happy to welcome you, madam, on the second day of this virtual workshop, and we look forward to your session and to all your interesting videos and to the training. Over to you, madam.
Well, thank you very much. And we did an awful lot yesterday, and I can see people are still joining. So while we are allowing for people to join, I'll just briefly recap on a few of the things we did yesterday before I go into the presentation. So yesterday you had an awful lot of good afternoon, lovely messages coming through, a lot of information. And what I did last night after the session, besides have a cup of tea, I thought I must get over the message that the resources that I am using, you can easily access very similar ones online. The magnificent array of materials that are available. So I'm showing you how they work with the program material, but as you can see, you can find similar ones while you're learning how to use this method. And I do understand that with COVID and everything, that trying to get anything by post is not the easiest thing. So I've added a few more information slides. And what I have also done for the handout is added some links where you'll be able to go onto platforms and also start creating your own digital resources using things like WordWall and everything. So besides that, yesterday we looked at the first two groups. I also spent quite a bit of time on showing you how to use the method, focusing on group one. However, what you have probably gathered is what you do in group one, you extend to all the other groups. So that reflective, multi-sensory approach is there throughout the whole program. However, what you might reflect on doing initially is using the letter sound groups. Please keep them to their order because they are there for a reason, and start doing some simple games with your children just to see how using synthetic phonics works. The reason why the program is successful is because all of the materials bring everything together and it's easy for you to organize. But many teachers didn't start with everything. They just started with the basics. So that is one important message. I don't want you to leave the training today feeling, I can't do this without a handbook. I can't do this. No. As Mr. Chris Jolly said yesterday, please look what's out there. Please have a look at videos and you'll begin to think, this isn't that hard to do. I just need to start implementing it and using it. So I'm hoping today we are going to continue on and give you more ideas. So may I go into to screen share? Yes.
Yes, Ms.
Yes,
Yvonne, please
please. Yes,
proceed.
Thank you.
please.
This is always the most worrying part for me, that this will never work completely.
It is.
So,
It is.
so I can see we're still adding people. So I'll just mention that you will be getting this in your handout pack because you're probably thinking, how am I going to remember those very quick movements you did and everything? But here you have them all in alphabetical order. But again, additionally, you will find that these movements are readily available on YouTube. The magnificence of teachers uploading resources for you to share and look at. And they're very simple activities that are attached, these actions are attached to all the worksheets and everything that you will find online. So I did a big check last night to see what you could access for free, so that you had an idea of the resource. It's a bit like buying a car. You want to try it out and find out everything about it before you actually purchase it. So you will have all of this in your pack that you'll receive over the next couple of days with everything. So don't worry about not remembering any of the actions today. So I still see we have, may I start or should I wait another minute or so?
Ma'am, a 1 minute wait will be, I think, good for the participants to just quickly log in. Will that be okay with your planning of the
Absolutely fine.
sessions?
So I'll give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to do today. We're going to continue with the letter sound groups, but built into the presentation that we have today is how we develop the reading and the writing skills that the children are acquiring with the knowledge that they have. Additionally, I'll be looking at how we can use the other senses like sound and also touch to develop the curiosity that is happening with letter sounds and putting them into words. More videos to show you what children are doing. Because, as I said, if we were in a face-to-face conference, I would be having you do these activities so that you would get a really good sense of what it's like from the child's perspective. And we mustn't forget what it's like for a child to be learning, especially in a second language, and allow the pace of teaching to suit your environment. Another thing is start to think about using this, as I said, quickly. If you are teaching or if you're a parent, start investigating the method because the more knowledge you have, the better you will be at implementing it. Some of the issues with implementation, it could be too quick. And I know Mr. Jolly said yesterday, well, in 1 year you could get through the whole program. That is quite ambitious. Teachers will tell you that that would be very, very difficult to do. And that's the perspective of the publisher and the teacher. We can see the difference. But what I hope you're getting the sense of is that children, when they get to about 5 or 6, they're equipped with some life skills that will help them accelerate with their next stage of learning. Even children who have specific learning difficulties will acquire some skills that they can transpose to other areas of their learning. And that's what we want, using that multisensory approach. So I can see we're up to nearly everybody there, or are we still waiting for some people?
You may proceed, ma'am.
Okay. All right, so as I mentioned, you've got your pack there, and we will be having a break at 15:40. I'll remember today, I've written it down. My apologies for yesterday. So yesterday we did a lot about how the connection of the letter shape and the letter sound is really happening with children and how they want to start giving print a meaning. So I'm going to show you this lovely video and I'm going to ask you, is this writing? So we're going straight into an activity now. Is this writing? Have a look and I'll wait for your responses in the chat. Now, is that writing? I'd like a yes or no answer. What do you think? Is it writing? Can you see what the children were doing? As I'm waiting for you to put some words in the chat, we'll have another look. What are they doing? Yes. Yes, and I can look in the chat. Some of you are saying yes, and there's a very good answer there. Yet they are forming the word, and yes. And this is what we call, it's using the whole body movement to do the word fan. Another way of using a multisensory approach, and the children are checking what they have. They check in their words, they're putting the sequence of letters into words. They'll remember that when they transpose it. Sight recognition, sound recognition, revision and consolidation. So these types of activities are really good. Additionally, when we go back into the classroom, it's gross motor movement. And again, it's that little bit of competitiveness that is a healthy thing in the classroom. Who's going to sit down first? Also, we could say, what letter sound is in the green chair? What letter sound is in the yellow chair? What letter sound is in the red chair? And again, cross curricular teaching. So this kind of activity, you wouldn't use it all the time, but to break up the revision, this is the one point I must get to you, that the constant revision of the letter sounds can consume your class if you don't do it in a multisensory way. We want to do it in different ways. So an activity like this once every couple of weeks is great. And you can have your register with the children to make sure that they all have a go. So this is another idea for your classroom. Looking at more multisensory activities, and you can see the benefit of having something like this. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, don't overuse them so that they don't have any specific outcomes. Here, I like the idea that we're working with the rainbow colors and the children are going with the arc. And as we know, the arc of the alphabet works very well with children. Simple things like a wet white box so that the sand doesn't get all over the place. The letterbox here, this is for tricky words, letterbox monster. We'll move on to tricky words today. And I do like this one because we're having the tactile, so we have the letter shape in the hands and also making the connection with the word. So as you can see, well, here they've said sight words, we can call them tricky words. These are very simple and cheap activities that even if the children do not have these at home, they could probably use plasticine. Again, making simple connections and ones that you can do very easily. I'm going to return to the resources now because as I mentioned in the introduction, I'm giving you an idea of how these resources work together in the program, but what you will readily see if you investigate online is that there are a lot of resources available. But what you've got to make sure of is that they are doing what you are asking them to do. And we're going to look at this now. Yesterday, I did show you a worksheet and I told you about breaking it down. However, if you're perhaps looking for a more in-depth evaluation, maybe working with specific learning difficulties or for a specific criteria, we can look at this page and we can break it down into all these elements. And you may be looking for specifically 2 or 3 within your IEP, or maybe working with children in a group. So again, don't dismiss a worksheet as just something to do at the end of learning a letter sound. What we can do, be working on specific criteria to meet the child's need. And additionally, what we can do is we can break it down into sections and work on these. I used to work one-to-one with children and break these down to meet what was required for the children's IEP. But then when I went back into a mainstream class, I could use the page for evaluation, but then I would give the children direction on what I wanted them to do, not the whole page in one class. It would be too much. Yesterday, you heard Mr. Jolly talk about using the books maybe 3 in 1 year. Well, normally we look at 1 book per year for 3-year planning. And so something like this is really consolidation, which is built around all the activities that we can do. And again, as I mentioned yesterday, it's part of your literacy or English class. It doesn't take up the whole class. We want to add it to our learning. So yesterday I mentioned about the importance of visual cues when we introduce writing. Now, often when I go into schools, they have an idea that writing can only be something which is demonstrated through text. You may well know that children and ourselves, we think in images. If I was to say to you, where would you like to be right now? An image would come to your mind and you'd be thinking, well, a beach or with my family. You've got a visual image. And this is the same for children. However, with this progressive writing, and you're going to see over the next few slides, how writing really does start building up and building up. We asked yesterday, are we forcing children to work too quickly? There is a debate about that, but there's also a debate about children having free writing or having guided writing or constructive writing to facilitate the understanding of the letter shape and letter sound. How am I using this? So there are these arguments about starting too early, but then what do we do with children who are being given the knowledge? How do we let that? How do they express themselves? So again, this depends on your unique teaching environment, how you wish to proceed with that area of learning. So here we have here typical. This is actually from one of my classes years ago. But what I liked about this is that I may not be getting very much with the writing, and I'm not expecting very much. But what I am hearing is a lot of the vocabulary and the sounds that are coming through with the stories and what they are saying. And then later on, we are transposing time. And here we had a story time. I'm delighted with that. You know, that's absolutely amazing. And these are Spanish children. So, you know, it's through, and then many of them don't have any other exposure except to English within the classroom. So, you know, this can be extended into group conversation where I could scribe. And I really like the idea of scribing for children because they can see then when what they're saying is becoming, it's in there for me to read back to them and they can hear this. And also, this is a good format to start the creative writing process as we move on. And sometimes these skills that we have implanted with children in infants, the strategies need to be continued in primary. And that's why it's quite important that there is this fluid understanding with what's happened with infant age children when they move on to primary. They can follow that trajectory of skills and also strategies. Now, this is a standard writing page. And as you can see, we have a dialogue, we have speech bubbles. And again, you could find something like this very similar on the internet or make your own. But what strategies would be used to help a child to start writing without forcing the issue? Well, first of all, what I'd do is block away everything that indicated, oh, this is going to be hard work. I don't want to do this. And you know children's immediate reaction. But what I'd say is, what are they saying? Let's identify the characters. What can you see? And you could engage children. It's a bee. Can we do the noise? It's a mouse. Eat, eat, eat. We have the snakes. Can we talk about the colors? What do you think they found? Or they have a letter. Do you get a letter? Nobody gets letters except bills today. But with children, it could be something exciting and magical. So first of all, if I was doing this online, or in a screen in the classroom, I'd probably use my whiteboard pen or something to fill in the gaps, get the children to offer me the solutions to these bubbles. And then I might not move on with this for a while. And then I would return back to it and then say to the children, do you remember this? So we'll get memory recall. The picture is working as a cue, and they could probably remember or even extend that original conversation we had. And we may try to do some attempted writing. But you may remember yesterday I spoke about how having the dots can be a wonderful thing so that children are not overwhelmed with the amount of lines that they have to work with. And you could say, well, we're going to do from the green dot to the red dot, or even less. And it's manageable, it's achievable. Additionally, with children who are in the 5 or 6 year old or even older bracket, why don't you have it as a collaborative task or where they're working together? And that takes the strain of the child having to produce more than one sentence. If you have a stronger child, they may be able to scribe for the weaker child. So there's lots of strategies that we can use about writing. Now, I'm referring back to the pupils book again. And equally, you can find activities like this. But what I'm going to share with you now is how you can extend this. The whole point of these activities is we use the one activity in many different ways so that one, you are not having to buy an awful lot of resources within your environment of teaching. And additionally, if you're working with this kind of book with a child at home, you can use it in a multifaceted way. So here we have children who have got the sound spaces. So as they progress in the book, they recognize that the dots are used for some activities. And here they've done the eye diagraph. So they may know that this is a pie per eye, per Pie. They may know this is a pie. You may have to help them with the word, remind them of the word, scribe the word on the board. But then we could talk about what type of pie is it? Is it an apple pie? Is it a fruit pie? Is it a meat pie or a fish pie? We're engaging children with their personal experiences and also vocabulary. Is it a hot pie or a cold pie? So passively, children are using adjectives. We're not naming them, but they are hearing them. So this sentence, which is just a fill the gap type sentence, has become more. We're asking children to elect vocabulary. We're offering vocabulary. We may scribe some adjectives and ask them to extend the sentence. It's immediately become a different activity. We could even say, how do I make this into a question? Is the pie hot? Is the pie cold? Is it an apple pie? You can be modeling all of this. You wouldn't want to overdo it initially, but little by little, you can see how we can use one sentence and we can start to extend that. I have even in classes gone back to these sentences, familiar ones to the children, and said, right, we're going to do a little bit of work on that sentence that you know. So using the familiar construction of the sentence, we've extended. Also, you may be familiar with the grammar train or the grammar snake, and there's a photocopyable snake in the handbook, but you can make your own where it's a long snake and children have post-its and they can change around the structure of the sentence. So you can do that at home. And then we move on to here with a little bit more passive development of fine motor skills where the children are required to colour and also they can fill the gap. Again, it's comprehension in its most basic form, comprehension. The children have to colour having read and understood what is required of them. So the k-o-ta is black. So if they colour this in red, you know that maybe they haven't understood one, what the activity is, and two, maybe they don't know their colours or they're not deciphering the word very well. So this is a little comprehension, maybe not in the way that we typically look at it. And this also could be extended to the orange readers or the books. I mentioned yesterday about the decodable books, and again, you can use these as an I Spy and a platform. But again, as children move on, as you can see here, children have moved on to the hua sound, which has the silent in it. We don't say is when we read it, we say whiz. But looking here, I'm more engaged with using the illustration to one, to get language flowing, and two, to get children to start putting it in a sentence. Now, yesterday I said to you that the one thing that the program does not give you is a vocabulary core. It has lots of spellings where children are asked to learn how the spellings works with the particular sounds that they're working with and the manipulation of those. And we have lots of activities built into that. However, some of you may work in schools or go on to work in schools where they do have a core English language book. So you can work alongside that. So often with these English books, you may have a lot of work going into vocabulary acquisition, but not very much going into phonics learning. As you see, we can progress on to Pupil Book 2. And here, just briefly, I wanted to show you how children are starting to learn the tricky words. And the tricky words you may be familiar as high frequency words or additionally sight words. So they have this very old traditional method of the look, copy, write, and check and have a go. However, this is after children have had enough exposure to these in reading and writing activities. And this goes through all the books where they have this embedded in games. But you can do these very simply with flashcards. And we do have flashcards, but you can make your own. You can write your flashcards. You don't have to print them out. You can just write them in print. And again, we move on to having a visual, a picture cue, and then, as you can see here, simple writing activity. When I first started using the books, I found that I'd get the children to colour in, and it took a long time. It was a big chunk out of my class, a really, really big time out of my class. So, what I did do was use this activity. You may recall yesterday I spoke about a dictation where you have the colour. And this was really good because here, if we think about we have a hen, but I am going to revise the body parts. I could say colour the eye yellow, colour the mouth or beak red, colour the baby or the chick yellow, colour the head orange. So again, I'm developing the children's listening skills, their comprehension skills, and I've used this activity like a dictation, and that helps with my evaluation. But then in another class, we may do group writing because it's very challenging. I can see we're using very, very tight grammar. I can see there is. I can see there is. And we start with that, and you'll find that children use that model over and over again because they're secure with it. And we have to try and help them develop it with other themes, like we have here pirates. And so this is just a consolidation exercise. But what I did do with something like this, where we had treasure and pirates, was involved a storybook to expand their creativity. So if we did a story about pirates, and they could bring that to their writing, and I could help them with that. So you can see how not with every activity you can link it to a story, but how beneficial that can be. And then moving on to book 4, and you're thinking, well, these are children who may be 6, and look what they're doing. They're being able to elect what they want to put into the sentence. Again, comprehension, they're picking the word, and they're also using the visual cues, which could then be an I spy, which I'll talk about in a while. So you may have to go through this vocabulary that they may not be familiar with, because look, we've got 2 verbs here, singing and swinging, and these are in the present continuous. And we also have some nouns, and we have what we would later refer to in grammar onomatopoeia, which are the sounds that come from things like bang and snap and snizzle. So here we go, we can see that. We also you can see, how is this? Again, it's comprehension, and they have to put down the numerical or where the animals are. And this is quite a good thing. You don't have to use this page to do this type of activity. You could find a page with animals, but as you can see, this would be a comprehension activity. It could also be a directional one. If you could say, if you were walking along the path, what is on the left? What is on the right? If you go straight ahead, what can you see? So we're talking about prepositions, maybe what is on the tree, and it's very passive. So these types of activities not only serve just to be able to talk about vocabulary and what you can see and respond in, we can start building in other concepts passively. And another page from book 3, as you can see, we're really moving along now. Again, you may think this is overwhelming or too much for a child. If this didn't meet what you were doing in your classroom, then you could reduce it down. You can read the story, you can look for key words. I've often done this where it's been up on the board and we've identified words that are an action or names, and children get to know that names have capital letters. And then we've answered this in a group, and we may then go on to doing it individually or all together. But can you see how children are really progressing with their skills? So now you've listened to me. I want you to listen to some sounds, and it's going to be quite interactive, and I hope that someone will be able to help with some of the answers. Because apart from the visual, children are hearing lots of sounds, we also want to engage them with their listening skills for creativity. So I'm going to play you some sounds, and I want you to put in the chat box what you think of, the first thing that you think of. Are you ready? Here we go. Okay, I'm going to check the chat box and see. What did that make you feel? Galaxy travel, excellent. UFO, brilliant. You got any more? Galaxy, yes. Yep. Rays, yes. Okay, now we've got another one. Just imagine you're in a classroom and you're being asked to think about something, maybe to do with a story or a piece of writing. How about this one? Missile. Oh, I like that one. Yeah. It's very relaxing, and we've got some very good answers. Water flowing by the beach, it could be roaring. So we're asking children to use their imagination. How about this one? Yeah. Yeah, and we miss that so much, don't we? Chattering children playing in a park. So can you see how your visual cues are coming in? Kids playing. Okay, how about this one? Oh, I like that Harry Potter piano. Yeah, so that could be a bit spooky, a piano sound, mystery, wonderful. Now, how about this one? Yeah. And if you're experiencing the monsoons at the moment, you're probably very related to that one. But as you can imagine it, how do you feel when it's raining? Oh, I can't go out, wet. Now, how about this one? Yeah, we've got some good responses here. Disney movie, old romantic movie, cartoon, princess, someone dancing. Yeah. And let's see if you guess this one. That one's a cup of coffee, which all people need. So as you can see, this type of activity embedded into your online teaching or in a class is offering children the opportunity to perhaps use some language that you are using and also to get the creation going. Although this isn't explicit to the program, what I have found is using sound bites like these. If we're doing things like the sound or the initial blends where you have snow, having snow, somebody walking on snow, getting children to listen and use that ability because it's a skill they have to develop. But additionally, this also is a moment for them to take turns. If you do work in groups, if you are in a classroom, you can say to one group, listen, and what do you think? Another group, and this is working with very young children. They don't have to describe, but we want them to interact, use language. And also, if it was something like the water, I could perhaps go, and give them the silent blending so that they had a clue. So I'm hoping this is something that you might be using or incorporate into your classes. So I want to now give you some just examples of how we do with children. And this one, although it says Ian, he is actually a bilingual child in Spain, or was. And what you are probably going to hear from while I speak is his active translation. He is thinking in Spanish, translating it to English, and you're hearing the accent probably come through. So we have, and I'm just going to go through some of it with you so you can understand what we need to look for and what we need to allow. So we have on May, so he's got May correct because he's probably seen that on the board. He's probably used to that spelling because here we have an alternative, but he may not have done the alternatives. He may know this from seeing the months of the year somewhere. Me, now this is a very typical Spanish issue where they put me instead of my. And me friends. Now look here, he can't hear the D. So there's an issue there. He can't hear the D in friends. We don't say friends. Went camping and he just needs to find out whether it's the curly cut or the kicking cut. At the evening, we had marsh O's. What great breaking down. He's breaking the word down and doing it with all the phonic sounds. It may not be correct, but we can hear that. And look, he's putting a full stop. So he's remembering I have to use some punctuation. Can you see all these little dots? Some, now this is great because it's correct. In one way, it is some, because he hasn't learned about the manipulation of the vowels, with putting the long vowel sound. Friends, sleep out. We got a tricky word there. Perfect. Side. Some friends sleep inside. That's great. Now here I can see that I may need to revise in my class the A sound again because he's got it in reverse. He's got the A sound the wrong way around. So we might need to work on looking at visuals so that he can get it the right way. And we have heard. This is correct. He's learned the sound and he hasn't learned the alternative yet. So theoretically, that is correct. Flapping of wings. Wings. He's translating. Instead of saying wing, he's going wings, which is from his accent. It was birds. So he hasn't perhaps grasped singular and plural yet, but that's fine. They, again, I need to look at that, went back. So he still hasn't understood the CK rule for some words, to sleep. So if you had a child in your class who produced something like this, how would you feel? If you'd like to just put a comment in the chat box, how would you feel about that? What would be your initial reaction to a child who'd been doing synthetic phonics? This was perhaps his emerging writing skills. If anyone would like to put in the chat box, would you be happy with a 5-year-old being able to produce this much by themselves? If anyone would like to comment. Do we have somebody writing? Okay. All right. Well, it is a huge achievement, and especially if it's not guided, it's free writing. They've done very, very well. I would be proud of him. Thank you. Yeah, very proud, because this would be an amazing achievement. Additionally, what we have here is a little bit more writing. So I want you to be able to understand how through expression, good expression, how with using their build-up of knowledge of sounds, you are gauging what they know and what they don't know. And additionally, you can see how the passive grammar construction is coming through. Here you can see the overuse of I went. He has some relation with phonics and simply, yes, he has. So you can see that it's all coming together. And here we can see that he's using repetitively, I went, because he's secure with that. But maybe I need to sort out going back again with, is it a k or a k? maybe we need to revise that. And somebody said yesterday, how do we do this? It's exposure to it and repetition. Remember, if you have children learning through a second language, we don't want them to just learn. We want them to learn what looks right and also sounds right. And here we have slide, and bouncy castle. Again, he's breaking it down into what he can hear. I saw. Now, saw is a tricky word. He may not have done that one. Ducks, again, I'm going to have to work on the CK. And with my mum, when he got golf correct and swings correct. So that was very good. So Polly did very well there. And a quick look at the benefit of dictation. Yesterday, we saw how that chap was working with tiles for doing dictation. And here we have the oo sound, room, oot, roof, the long oo sound, food, soon, hoop, and we have a context sentence. It is my roof. Now, typically, children are doing this pretty early on the whiteboard. But what they're doing here is the discrimination between the short oo sound and the long oo sound. But also, they're beginning to see the rhythm and also the repetitiveness of how you can change the initial sound and the end sound, but we also have the middle sound, which is the same. And again, this would take minutes to do once children get into it. Now, we do have something, as I mentioned, that I'm going to include for you is the word bank that Sue Lloyd has put together. But additionally, if you needed sentences, it's in the word book, but also the word bank. But I'm sending you the PDF copy of this so that you have all the dictation and everything that you need to do. Now, this is one of our trainers who is in Kenya. Her name is Shan, and she's going to be showing you the benefits of using dictation. She will mention an app, and I do believe that during COVID there have been times when the apps have been absolutely free. It's worth joining the Facebook page of Jolly Learning because they often put all the reading books for one particular level free to download during the pandemic so that teachers can share these with their children. So let's have a look at how Shan does dictation with her children.
Hello parents and carers. Today's video is about how to teach dictation. It would help if you have a whiteboard and a whiteboard pen or a chalkboard and some chalk or just some blank paper at home to be able to do this activity. This activity is very much focusing on listening for sounds in words. We need to be able to call upon some of the skills that we have already learnt in Jolly Phonics. We need to know the sounds, we need to know how to form them, and we need to be able to hear the sounds in words to know what to write. Like with blending, it is really important that we only ask the children to write words with sounds that have been taught. You might be unsure of which words and which sounds to ask your child to be able to write. So once again, you can go to your Jolly Phonics Lessons app. Choose the sound that you have been learning. Scroll through all of the sections that you have already taught to the section that says writing. Here, there are some sounds to revise that can be called out one by one for your child to write down, followed by some words containing the sound that they have been learning to write as well. Other ways of doing dictation, you can also call out the sound for them to write, the word for them to write, even building up to a short phrase, or you can use the actions to mime. Let's see if you can tell what this word is. Sat. We can go into the Jolly Phonics app to the lesson activity ideas, and lesson activity 3 says, ask my friend the sound. So you can play this with your child, where they can check the words that they have written and the sounds and ask you if they have written it correctly. After writing, your children can put in the sound buttons and write the number of sounds that are there. Like in the word hand, there are 4 sound buttons, there are 4 sounds. In the word song, there are 3 sounds because the sound is a digraph, and we've written the number 3. Thank you.
So as you can see, it's pretty simple to implement. You really don't need the app, but what you can do with the dictation and also the words is get children to start thinking about how they all sequence together. And again, in this activity, you saw how she used the actions and also used the handwritten flashcard for the children to do the sounds. So again, it's very simple. But when we talk about dictation with young children, most schools are horrified. They think about it as something that you do in secondary to make sure that you're putting everything in the right way. It's very passive and it's very easy to do. It's quite easy to do online as well. So don't worry about that. Now, you may have seen a little bit of this yesterday where again, if you are using resources similar to this for your online classes, again, here we're looking at how children are using adjectives. And this is from the grammar book, but I wanted to show you some progression. And as you can see up here, the grammar moves on to using multisensory actions. And as you saw yesterday, I talked about the letter name and the letter sound. We talk about proper nouns and also adjectives. So the children have clues in how their sentences are constructed. We talk about the past, the present, and the future. So it's good internalization of what we're asking them to do. And here, you can see that we have this illustration and the children are free to put what they want to put in writing after. We're asking for the visual cues first. And they don't have to have a printed sheet. They can do this first. Now, working with children online, I've often had them do this as a pre-class activity so that they can bring it and we're ready to start the class. We're ready to start engaging rather than opening up my class and saying we're going to draw a monster or an alien, because it will take up a lot of my time and I will lose their interest. It's the same in class with children as well. So that's something that I have started in infants and we've implemented all the way through. Now, if you go onto the Jolly Learning UK website, you will find that there are many free resources, and these are some of them. And the beauty about these is that you can do what I explained earlier on, where you can cut the bottom off and have it as a nice spy. And you can start getting children motivated about speaking, and then they can add that to I'm giving you ideas for online because I'm aware that many of you may be going back to an online scenario. But what I have got parents to do is the children have been sent the image and the parent record it on their phone and they send it to me. So again, I am being able to do some evaluation work. I'm listening to the words that may have the right key pronunciation, also the variety of words. But this, as we're using technology, could take up a lot of time in my class. So apart from that, and you have here, this is a different approach where children get to have their 4 vocabulary words. And this is similar to Jolly English. They have some vocabulary and they have to elect, a bit like a game, which is the right one. And then we start the writing. Now, there's not many children who help fix the car these days, but we can use this as a good way for fantasy. What did we find in the car? What noise does the car make? What type of car do you have? How many wheels does the car have? Or do you have a motorbike? So we can open up. So yesterday somebody said, are the resources theme-based? No, they're not theme-based, but you can add a theme to them if you wanted to. Not every single page, but you could certainly branch out. And punctuation. As we know, punctuation is one of those things that children either get pretty quickly, and it also takes reading to understand how it works and how to use punctuation for intonation, also anticipation, and developing your writing skills. Now, this is something that has been adopted by the Jolly trainers to show people. I have a question. Mum, why is the first word in song has 3 numbers? It also has... All right, so I'm just going to address the question. Somebody said, why has the word in song got 3 sounds? Because as you move on, you will see that we do ng, N and G will always be one sound. because in English there are many words that have N and G together. So we would not say s, o, ng. We say s, o, ng. So ng becomes one sound. So we're going to see that as the groups move on. And hand, which has 4 numbers, there's 4 sounds in hand, which is a, n, d, hand. Whereas song is s, o, ng, 3 sounds. Now, just like you're asking that, children acclimatize very quickly to understanding that a word like queen, the qu in queen is 2 symbols and it has 1 sound. So this is how it works with the progression as we move through the groups. Now, I'm just going to let you enjoy this because it is absolutely fabulous. And if you are teaching in class, regardless of phonics, why not incorporate this into your classroom? Here we go.
Welcome to Kung Fu Punctuation. Capital letter. Capital letter. Full stop. Full stop. Comma. Comma. Colon. Colon. Semicolon. Semicolon. Question mark. Question mark. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Speech marks. Speech marks. Apostrophe. Apostrophe. Brackets. Brackets. Capital letter. Capital letter. Well done.
Isn't that just amazing? And you can imagine, you wouldn't use that in every class, but could you imagine if you had a short text without any punctuation and you were asking the children to add the punctuation, but using Kung Fu punctuation, or if they were even online with the punctuation and you wanted them all to focus and join in. This is available on YouTube. I'll send you the link. However, it's one of those things that has been incorporated into our Jolly Phonics training as a diversion for the children. Again, it's multisensory and it's a little bit of fun because punctuation classes can be a tad boring. But using something like this, which is using your body, also having to remember we have sound, it's a little bit exciting. So I hope you like that one. And we'll move on. So we're going to go to group 3, and here we have group 3, and I'll just mention to the lady who, or the person who mentioned about the ng sound, as you can see in group 5, you will see a change in how we deliver all the sounds. So in group 3, we have, I'm going to say the sounds, g, o, a, l, f, b. And these are represented in the format that you are now very familiar with. The children would be familiar with the story, and they may be familiar with a lot of the ways you deliver the story in with guessing or covering up things with post-its. So with G, this is the action for G. Very simple, G. And it's to do with water going down the drain. The next one is O. Now, we've got to be pretty clear with O, because a bit later on, we'll be doing oo, oo, and these are the 2 letter symbols together, the long oo and the short oo sound, and this is O. And we do this by switching a light on and off. O, 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 O. Again, a very easy one to remember. Children then move on to ah, and it's an umbrella going up. Ah. But as you notice, these are vowels. So we want to just make sure that children are, as I mentioned yesterday, really secure with their short vowel sounds. We have ah, up umbrella, ah, up umbrella. And then we have l, lollipop, lollipop. So there's lots of vocabulary here. There's the storylines. We can get the children to guess what's going on. If they've seen the page a couple of times, like you could use the small books, you could cover them up with Post-its. I'll show you how to do that. But we have our sounds, g, o, a, l. So the children now are beginning a bigger range of letter sounds, and also what they will be doing in group 3, we also have again, f is important. We want to get the symbol right with the sounds, because later on, if you continue with grammar, they'll be learning that the PH is a f as well. So as I mentioned yesterday, this foundation stage of just getting the letter correlation along with the sound correlation is a good investment. And also children have plenty of exposure in being able to model this in writing. And then we have b, b, an easy sound. But again, we want to get this right because children often confuse it with d. You remember when I was saying yesterday that mnemonic that we tend to use with bed with b, d, b, d. So we want to make sure that they're getting the right sound with the right letters correlation. We also have to introduce something that children will be familiar with, is double trouble, which we call the floss rule. And they start to understand that sometimes, right back to, remember yesterday when we looked at those words I gave you, we had the double D sound, that was Stranderton, the double N sound. Children begin to understand that sometimes these sounds can often be doubled up. So for example, the word rabbit, we don't say ra-a-b-b-it. So what we do with children, we help them with the robot arm, as we call it, or you can hold your fingers, which is r-a-b-it, rabbit. So they begin to identify that two consonants can have one sound. I could say r-a-b-it. So that they are understanding the beginning, the fundamental, that two letters together can have one sound. That's quite a concept to understand. So again, looking at things like this, children understand the floss rules, and they began to understand how they work together. So we have the f, l, s, and sometimes z in words. They can double at the end of the word and follow a short vowel sound. Now, when I'm using all of these words, you're probably thinking, how on earth am I going to explain to a child about double trouble, about doubling consonants, about the floss rule? We don't have to explain, but what we do need to do is give them lots of visuals so that they can see. This is particularly difficult, this line, for children here in Spain, because the double L is a zh sound, is a zh. And so it's very difficult for them to go hill. It'll be h. And you probably have similar issues with some of the words that you have in your language as well, the sounds. But again, look what we're doing. Right, we can't do all of these, but we can do some of these. We start looking at the short vowel sound and how children begin to identify that the two consonants together have one sound. It's not st, a, f, or h, a, f, cl, if, or sp, l, l, or bit, il, l. How you model it and how children identify all comes down to these visual cues, and also listening to them reading, and also working with these in dictation. We're back to that full cycle of using everything. And here what you can see is how we tackle them in the workbook, where children have got a selection. Again, I'd probably go through modeling them in a sentence. Children draw them to make that connection. I know the word and I'm going to have a visual cue, so they're using that resource. And I spy. And also, look what we have here, Miss, Doll, Bill. I could put maybe not all of them, but some of them into a sentence so that I'm modeling these on the board or on a whiteboard for them. But this is the most important part, the visual to support the word. And then modeling like here. We don't say egg, egg. They need to hear it and repeat it. hear it and repeat it. And so we're doing some tricky concepts quite passively. And also they begin to learn about ascenders and descenders with their handwriting. Now, if we're talking about building up skills, I've gone off using what is available in the program and more looking what you can use that you can make yourself or find on the internet. And so a very simple activity like this, I see 3 snowflakes. I'm going to ask you, what skills are we addressing here? So I'm going to get you to think a bit with this slide. What skills are the children using on this slide here? I see 3 snowflakes. It's not a test. If any of you'd like to volunteer 1 or 2 suggestions on how this activity could work, and we can bring those to the rest of the people. How could we use these? Anyone got would like to suggest? We have people writing. How would we use this? Sequencing, very good. O sound, yes. We have snowflakes, yep. And what else could we be doing? Flakes, long E, flakes, yeah. We also have singular and plural. And also counting, yes, exactly. We have numeracy. But more, all of these things, what you're seeing, what a good evaluation tool this is. If you had something as simple as this and you're using it for all what you have suggested to me, the sounds, numeracy, we also have comprehension involved here, along with using the fine motor skills. So that very simple activity can be used in many ways. Now this one here, imagination of falling, of course, and this would be a really good activity to perhaps move on to something which could be a writing activity or connected to a story. So we're trying to connect everything together. Now I really like this one here, because this one here not only serves as a reading, you can do 1 sentence at a time, but also while we're using the connectors, children are beginning to understand the importance of having these to make the sentence interesting, but also what they hear. So these are the children who've got a bit more skills. I'll quickly do this one. I really, really like the idea of this one, because just like the look, copy and check, this is actually more tactile, where children have got their keywords, and what we're doing is we're asking them to find the letters. So again, it ties in with letter shape correlation. Are the children being able to understand what they read, and then with the sound discrimination, pick out the right letters? For some children, that can be a little bit challenging, and additionally you can see if there's any reversal going on, if they're not sequencing the letters correctly for the word they have and then having to write. Now I'm going to throw this one out to you and ask, how do you think this could work? This one here on this slide, we've had some great answers for this one, so I'm going to ask you to join in. What about this one? What do you think about this activity here? If anyone would like to join in. Okay, color identify sequencing, yes, that's great, yeah. And the good thing about something like this is if you were working at home, or even if you were working in the classroom, is when we're using all the same colors, as you know, it can be confusing. Children can check that they're on the right sentence. You could even have it as a self-checking mechanism where they have the numbers behind so they know the right sequence. But also if they're using Post-its at home on a whiteboard, boom, 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 boom. Are they using the skills that you're teaching? Are they, what comes next? Yeah, brilliant. Are they using their ability to say, well, capital letters and look punctuation? Does it make sense? Can they read it? Again, this could be a very quick reading and comprehension activity which you could evaluate. And if you recognize that this is a skill they're building up, is it memory, or are they actually doing the comprehension? Would you need to add some cards or take some cards away or mix them up? But the good thing about this, jumble sentences, very good. The good thing about this is it can be transposed well to a home activity. So again, it's a simple resource and you don't have to spend a lot of money on that. Here, again, this is a downloadable resource, but again, you can do it online with a highlighter facility where they're looking for tricky words or looking for target words. So we have the E sound, the long E sound, simple thing that can be done online. Children using the highlighter or in class, you can have sheets like this laminated where they can be used over and over again. So you're not wasting your resource. Very simple. And again, I like this where somebody's used a piece of continuous paper and they've put the tricky words and they're asking the child to circle them as they say them out. Again, this is something I used to do on the blackboard way before whiteboards and have it ready for when the children come in and get them up. And children would say the tricky words that they knew, and elected children would have to do them in different color chalks. So very simple activities that you can make and either download. Now, looking onto the reading, of course, I keep going on about how we need to connect everything. The empowering thing about children making their own books. Again, as we saw yesterday, the emerging writing styles and things coming through, but we need to be positive and also get children using the logic behind what we're teaching. So making their own books is very empowering. It's something they can do at home. Additionally, if you're working online, the parent can photograph the content and send it to you. And again, if you're asking a child to do a tiny little home book like this to reflect the content you've been teaching, be it topic, be it themed, be it vocabulary, you're getting a sense of what they have retained. And if there's some emerging writing and you can see the sounds coming through, what a bonus. And I will use this again, but this one here, what I wanted you to see was these can be reading. I used to just hold up strips, reading strips. I'd start all my classes with, let's read this. And they just read one strip. And then we moved on with what we were doing. Another one. And then at the end of the week, when we'd done quite a few, the children were amazed at what they could read. You know, we can read all of these. And then we would just practice with and, but, next, then. And although I hadn't explicitly taught these, they were building up their grammar knowledge for when they went on for explicit teaching. And we're reading. It's not a level, as you can see, I'm keeping, and you can find lots of these on the internet. If you say reading for group 3, synthetic phonics, reading for group 5, you can find lots of activities like this to support your classes. Now, many of us work with children who have emerging learning styles, and one thing that's hard to discriminate before a certain age is dyslexia. I often flag up using this open font, the open dyslexia font, because it can be extremely helpful for children who may have visual processing or you may feel have emerging dyslexia. As I say, it's very difficult for us to simulate before a certain age. However, this font is free. You can download it. You can use it even for a font to type. But allegedly, it has a 3D effect, which helps children discriminate the letter shapes. You can see here that we have the A. There is also one that is like a Comic Sans, where the A is slightly different, because this font, this shape A, can be confusing for some children. So I thought I'd just mention this, and it'll be in the handout and where you can find it. And again, once you've downloaded it onto your laptop, it's ready to use as part of your font selection, and it's free. You can go to donation, but it's free. So I use this quite a lot in my classes, especially as we're online a lot. Apparently eases the stress on the eyes. So I thought I'd mention that. So after group 3, look at this, we're only up to group 3 and the children are doing so much. And as you can see here, they're evolving pretty rapidly and probably more than you thought they could do before. So another thing, as the last thing you will see here, I'm not going to read this all out, our teachers and parents will be gaining confidence with the materials. They'll begin to see the rhythm, they'll understand how they work really well together, and additionally, start incorporating their own types of activities like I've showed you. So as I said yesterday, you could start with one book, and just with that teacher's book, you could start building up and building up. It doesn't have to be explicitly all the materials. And as we continue, we got to think about, where am I going? And I keep drawing us back to our planning. You need to know where you want children to get to. Don't keep it just, well, we'll just go and see where we're going to, because you want to put into this your revision and assessment. And this is important because you don't want children to get to the end of the program with huge pockets of knowledge that is missing. Because when they go into elementary, when they go into the primary age teaching, it's quite difficult with a heavy curriculum to go back and revise these concepts. It's probably better to slow down, incorporate more activities to find out where the gaps are, and revisit these with your building on this spiral where you're going up, but you're also going back, just building more revision. And this is possible using the pupils' books. But again, if you're in a situation where the budget is so tight, you can't have a pupils book for every child. You can have a pupils book and have that on the screen and use the elements of that for your consolidation. Children may not be physically doing the stuff in the book, but they can be transposing it to paper. You can have 3 lines, we can do their writing. They can additionally be the blending on the page. So you can be quite creative in what you can do. So as we continue, I feel like I'm giving you a lot of talking now, is about what we need to think about is age appropriate. Don't rush it. And what I have seen with most schools is they have huge successes, and then rather than let those successes develop naturally, they put pressure on teachers to do more quickly. Please try and resist that. If you have children at the age of 4 identifying 20 sounds correctly, emerging, that's fine. Don't change it to 24 or 25 letter sounds. So be careful you don't become a victim of your success where you're trying to do things too quickly, because it's like the prestige of the school or the prestige of your classes. It's better to have a good pace and the children are learning. And also, as you grow using the method, you probably invest in more resources. So we're still looking at the 5 core skills, and now we're going on to looking explicitly at blending and segmenting. And keeping an eye on the time so that I know when you can have your break. So blending and segmenting is a life skill. You saw that yesterday as we were doing those words, and we still do them now as adults. If you go to a restaurant and you have to look at a menu, you would start doing that, breaking it down. So what we're going to look at is how we can assess this with children using their reading and also their writing skills for blending and segmenting. And the decodable readers. I mentioned yesterday about the decodable readers. Please make sure they fit the sounds that you're doing, because as you can see here, we go in a particular order. There are many great resources that are free, but just make sure that the program they are following doesn't mix up the order of the letters you are teaching, because there are some programs that have the sound in the first 5 sounds or 6 sounds. And if your child hasn't had that sound yet, it can be slightly confusing for them. So a decodable book offers the right level for the sound groups that you're using. The children can start read aloud. Now, one of the issues I had when I first started teaching was that children had great production, but not such great comprehension. So although we were getting the language coming through perfectly, they had very little understanding with what was going on, and they depended highly on the visual cues. So again, it's expanding, saying, what do you think and what does that mean? And seeing what they would get from that. And as I just said, they can talk about what they see on the page. And I can't say enough, don't rush the process. And there's a bit of a confusion about reading fluency. Many people think reading fluency is how quickly can I get through a book? How quickly can I read a book? But what we know about fluency, it's more about mastery skills with reading. Am I blending and segmenting? Do I recognize that there is punctuation? Am I anticipating? Am I using intonation? Am I reading for meaning or am I reading for gist? So these are all things we take in as we understand the word fluency. Additionally, you may be using reading tests. There's a variety of reading tests that are available. But you've also got to ask yourself, what purpose is that doing? And additionally, the person administering the test, do they know how the child works in the classroom? I've been to many schools where they had somebody do the reading test that had no knowledge of how the children performs in the class. So being taken out of the class to the SEN room to do a reading test immediately made the children at a deficit. They're out of their familiar territory. They don't know the person very well, and you're asking them to read. So the performance was really poor. So we need to take these into consideration when we're doing our assessments. So this is an example of the very, very first decodable book. And as you can see, we haven't got a lot of language to use because it's very limited with 6 sounds. But just imagine with 6 letter sounds, I can open a book and I can decode that mystery of a word there. There's the squiggles, and I understand what it means. Yesterday, I showed you a slide of the girl with all those squiggles, and the child was like, "I have no idea." But look what we've got here. I can read in, a tin. And as a teacher, again, look, I could have it up on the board. I can go through. Well, this is a tin. What's a tin? It's a place where I can put my cake. Look at that. And look, I'm even drawing attention to an ant. We have an ant. We have a snail. Snail. I can do the first sound. Okay, so the bird would not fit into my phonic sounds, but I might use that as vocabulary. So as you can see, there's a lot I can use here. Just with the first 6 sounds, children can start reading. It's a very limited form of reading, but how empowering that you can pick up a book and you can actually start to make sense of what's going on. So these are these readers, and these are the orange one, which has a little bit more of a selection as they move along. But additionally, it's not just exclusive to Jolly. You can find these anywhere. And as we progress, this is as we progress in the group sounds, as you can see, but this is also group 1, in, pin, in, spin. So we have 3 sounds. We have in, spin, 4 sounds. Spin. Very important for when we put in these words together. And as we move on with the groups, you may say, well, look at this. I can see mouse, and the sound is in a lighter font. Yes, because what we're trying to do is get children to understand what is sounded and what is unvoiced. So we don't say mouse, we say mouse. However, children need to recognize that although they can't hear it, we see it. We need to have it in our writing when we transpose. So things like this are done with the bold font and the light font. So children get the pronunciation. They're not saying mousy, they're saying mouse. However, what they do recognize is with the familiarity, I can see that there's an E at the end of that. And then we move on to more children who have better reading skills, non-fiction. And there was a thing before that there wasn't the range of books. The books were very static. There were only little groups of books. And now we have a lot more. We have non-fiction, and we have books that can be added doing topic work and themes, as you can see. You can have a whole thing. But again, as you can see, we're looking at how things are done. They've got some really good photographs. But additionally, there are so many of these types of books that you can access online now, and they're not terribly expensive. Now, the skill of blending and segmenting, this is a great visual for you to see of what we're looking at. Although it's just like we say, blending and segmenting. It embraces all of these skills. And as I said before, these are life skills. And we do for our most simplest, which is hearing the words in the sentences and rhymes and alliteration, to moving on to more complex. And I keep referring back to the spiral, and that's the spiral that we have going up and going down all the time. So we often return to the basic skill, even though we're progressing, we always return to that. And additionally, it's something that is a continuous circle with what we're doing. And you may be seeing that with this program, we're always working in this circle of what I know, what I'm learning, what I can use, and what I can demonstrate. Now, there are many English programs that do that, but this is explicitly looking at language, the English language, and how it works together, which makes it a little bit different to English resources that may have a phonics component embedded into the unit. They may pick one or two sounds, but not explicitly give you, the teacher, enough background on how these can be used. So that's another issue about using embedded phonics within a program. We need to get it right at the beginning, as I said, because going back can often be problematic. And we're doing it in a systematic way so that it makes sense to the child. And I've put here standard English because I've spoken a lot about using decodables. Many of you inherit books which are in standard English. Many children move on to class books that are delivered in standard English. And this is not a bad thing because the world is standard English, if we're looking at it in that way. Newspapers, print, what we see online. So children gravitate to understanding that. We're talking about decodable to getting them ready for moving on to standard English. And it would be wrong not to introduce standard English with stories that you read. Also, the storybooks that they look at out of curiosity are probably not all decodable, but are in standard English. So when we're using the decodable books, it's to develop the reading skill and for you to listen to the child so that you're hearing what you're teaching. But equally, we need to have the storybook corner. We need to have children picking up and identifying what they know within the pages out of curiosity. So we're back to that curiosity. And eventually they'll develop the skills with the tricky words to move on to standard English. So again, it's all about progression. So blending and segmenting, what are we asking children to do? We're giving them the skills to look at individual sounds, units of sounds, and start reading. Additionally, we want them to have comprehension and perhaps introduce some tricky words. And what they are doing then is making connections with what's going on in their mother tongue. And we're having this wraparound approach of what I see and what I hear and what I say and what I read and what I write is all connected. Children will be making connections of what they hear in their mother tongue, and they may even be making connections depending on the symbolic code with the graphemes, the shapes. In some countries, it's very transparent. In other countries, it's completely different symbolic code, and it can take a little bit longer. But the one thing that children have is that ability to learn and not worry about anything else. And as we get older and we learn another language, we are encompassed by other things. We've got shopping, we've got family, we've got bills to pay, we've got work. We want children just to focus on this. So as you can see, and as you probably know, learning this all when you're very young makes sense before we move on to doing the really tricky stuff when we get to a curriculum. So as you saw, this is where we have children. Can I read the word? Yes, I can read the word bat. Can I identify the sounds? Yes, bat, bat. Can I blend them together? Bat, bat. Can I say the word and identify the meaning? Bat, and I can point at the correct visual. This is what we need to do time on and off over the time with children to make sure all these skills are working together. It's no good if you can just read it. If I said to you, simple activity like this with color dots. Can you name the orange sound? It's an ah. About the red one, it's a ch. Can you do the action for this one? But okay, can we blend them together? But at bat. Can you point to the visual? And I could have 3 different things. Like say, yeah, the bat. So I understand that the child has all of these skills in place with this very simple activity. Okay, it does get more challenging as the children move on with their letter knowledge. But what they are doing is a simple thing like this. I'm seeing if all the skills are in place. Before I move on, has anyone got any questions? Because I realise I've been speaking an awful lot. And I know you can zone out when somebody's talking a long time. People can zone out and come back and zone out. Before I move on, are there any questions? I'll leave the chat box. Yes.
Yes. Miss Yvonne, though you have been answering all the questions from the chat box, but one question has come up. I'll just read that out to you. Just give me a second. Yeah, the question is, can we and how can we incorporate phonetics for a child who is over 7 or 9 years old? Do we use the same stages? This has been posed by Miss Diana.
Yes. Now, it's not phonetics, it's phonics. Please be sure you're not confusing the two, because the International Phonetic Alphabet is completely different to phonics. Now, if you're working with older children, you have a huge benefit. And the benefit is that they have got understanding of sounds and they have got understanding of letter shapes. So it's a much quicker process. And what you can use is you can use something as simple as this. Can you see? This is like a very simple chart that I'm using, where the children can run through the sounds pretty quickly. And then with older children, what we need to do, as you will see now, is to move on more with the digraphs. We need to move on with the digraphs with older children. With older children, with them having these skills in place, 1, it can be a benefit, but 2, if they've been taught wrongly in the first place, you have to undo that. But what you will find is the process is much quicker. You can elect what elements you want to take out of some of the workbooks or using the teacher's books and progress very quickly. And even if they're working with an established language book, you can choose what I want to put in with that. And the only thing I would say is you must follow the sequence. So just for fun, if I had 9-year-olds, I would do the beginning group. I'd go through all of the sounds, do the actions, because it would be fun. I'd get them blending and segmenting very, very, very quickly because they have that skill. But then I would focus on the digraphs and the alternatives a lot more, because that's maybe where they're missing pockets of information. So you would find that it would work incredibly quickly. And I'm going to show you now exactly how that works.
Your thinking is ready. You're going to sound out the words. I'm going to show you the cards, and we're going to sound out the words and blend the sounds together.
To read, children need to be able to hear and say the individual sounds and put them together to make a word. This process of putting the sounds together is known as blending, and is a skill that children will need to develop and practice daily.
Good, well done. Next one. Good, well done. Which A diagram can you see in this word here?
After just learning the first 3 letter sounds, children will be able to read simple words.
Sound it out.
At first, children are taught to hear the sounds and listen for the word.
Can you see in this word? Have a careful look. Which one? Tolly. Well done.
Then, they're taught to say the sounds themselves and listen for the word.
Well done.
So first of all, we're going to do oral blending. Here, I've got some pictures. So I might show you a picture, I might hold it to my chest and say, here, I've got an R. What have I got? Yes, I've got a car.
Children are taught to say the sounds in 2 ways, loudly and softly.
We say the first sound, and then we sing the rest together. So it's
If children start with the first sound louder and whisper the rest softly, they're much more likely to hear the word.
There's the word. Say the first sound, sing the rest together. So we do all of three blended. This is only the sounds we've learned so far.
So as you can see, even with older children, you would do this pretty quickly, but it's something that's incorporated into our teaching practice, and we do it maybe just for a couple of minutes at the beginning of the class, quick blending through. And you will see that they use the whiteboard, but we also have, these type of cards which have the dots. And you can print these. There are lots of them on the web pages I mentioned yesterday, Sparkle Box, Twinkle. But just for fun now, I want you to have a look at how we are blending. Now, as you can see here, this is a difficult word. I can't ask you to join in vocally, but if you were given this name, you would do exactly what those children are doing. You'd be saying Natasha Romadobalovsky. And you're going back to being 3 years old, blending and segmenting. And then here you would be using your phonic knowledge. Okay, that's Fiona. It's not K, it's a silent K because there's a consonant there with an N. It's a Knuckleworth. You would have to use your knowledge. And again, something that's very typical, FISA, which again is something that we've all had to understand. We have a foreign word, which is a German word, and we don't pronounce the P, we pronounce the F, but somehow we've learned how to do that because we've heard it. And just for fun, you want to know the longest word in the English language? That's it. And I'm not even going to attempt to try and do this one, but it's 45 letters long and it's a medical condition and it's the longest word in the English language. However, in Welsh, there is something that is much longer. So that's a quick look at how we change. We develop more skills at it, but we're still doing it. So just look at, you heard one of our trainers called Jazz. We have S'ata. We're constantly going back to being 3 years old when we were doing S'ata with everyday language, standard English. And we have Sat. I've identified the vowel, which is really important, and also the sound buttons. Again, really important that children see this. So we have our blending, and it works very well for children who may have specific learning difficulties, more so if you put the vowels in a different colour. We know the positiveness of that. But one of the things we may have is that they may recall the sound and the corresponding shape, but they may not recall these when they're in flashcards or in text. And that's why we have to have that multi-pronged approach where we're using all the different resources. And also, we need children to sound out. So, for example, the word cat is a k, a, t. So they're making that discrimination about the letter sound and not the letter name, which often can be difficult if we introduce the alphabet too early. And all your resources, make sure that if you're going to the effort of printing them out, make them that they have a lot of alternative ways they can be used. And also understanding the adaptability. Here, I'm going to show you some very quick little ideas. Look at this, Post-its. This is what children can be doing at home. And this is quite a small child. And look, she's identifying, and probably we could ask her, look here, we've got the floss rule, the f sound. We've got the, the double L, the sound, the Y and Y. Is it a toughy Y sound at the beginning? Right there? So we have a child doing that. And additionally, this, using the robot arm, really helps for children organising how it can go onto paper. And these are from the workbook. Very, very simple activities like I showed you yesterday, where children are sorting. They have the word, they're looking at the key sound, and they're making the visual cues. And you laminate them and they last for years, absolutely years. And again, a lot of people are working from home. We can do this with Post-its, make our own ones. And this is another way for children to start understanding how to blend, but also we want them to have that discrimination. It's important that we're hearing the sound, because as we're moving on, children will be exposed to the alternative sounds. So this is a great video on how we're getting children engaged with blending.
Drive-through blending. We're going to make words, but we're going to drive the sounds through to make the words. Now we're going to drive very slow at the beginning, and then we're going to pick up the speed. Let's do the sound. So let's drive that through. A little faster. Very good. Now let's go a little bit more difficult. 2 letters, 1 sound. Okay, what is this? So we're going to drive through. But nobody really talks like that. We don't say the, so we need to pick up the speed a little bit. So let's go. Let's go a little faster. Thumb. Okay, very good. I think you're really getting this. 2 letters, 1 sound. Okay, so let's drive through. A little faster.
So I'm not going to play it all, but you're getting the idea how using different ways to revise and introduce, children are seeing. It's a fun aspect as well. You may be thinking, well, I can't invest so much time in trying to make my classes fun and, diverse with all these activities. No, nobody's expecting you to. However, once a week, twice a week, if you can engage the children by using something different and unexpected in your toolkit of teaching, you will have them being able to not anticipate what my teacher's going to do in class today, and therefore using the knowledge not in a repetitive way with activity or writing and reading, but using their other skills, which is highly important. And very quickly before we have the break, I'm just going to show you how we have this page in the book which is all about looking at using the short vowel sound. Well, that may be way too much information for a small child to understand. And additionally, you may want to break it down into smaller units. And here I've gone for the middle, vowel sound, a, e, I, and working on these before I move on to more complex. This is what I probably do on the board or online. And then I may ask the children, one, it's comprehension. I could have log, dig, dog, but they may not know that this is a dog. So this is where we have to slow down in it's English as a second language. We always have that balancing. Do the children know? Do they know the word for the image I'm putting up? And also, can they decode and blend correctly? So doing it in small chunks. So you have 9 images here that you could break down into units and just do bit by bit. 1, teaching the vocabulary, and 2, then looking at the word and deciding which one is correct. And we've got the 3 lines here, so they're building up their knowledge. Again, some very simple and cheap activities that you can have. And once you've made these, you tend to keep them with you forever. These are templates that have come from the internet on how to make your own cubes. You may be using a lot of these already within your practice. Paper cups, the eggs that have the sweets in them. I love this, and every school I've been to has got their spiral bound notebook where they have vowels and consonants so that children are looking at real words. They're looking at pseudo words that are made up, but what we're doing is getting articulation. The ping pong balls, how great is that? Again, we're looking at colors, and children are taking out sounds, they're taking out words, and they have to do the segmenting and simple flat books. Again, very easy. And then children start to build up their recognition with consonant blends, and you may be very familiar with these type of spinners. I mean, years and years ago, before they became really technical, I remember having these in my classroom, and they were very simple. There wasn't a visual cue or anything, but basically what I was getting children to do was have onset rhyme or look at consonant blends. And here we have some from Jolly Learning, and they are pretty spectacular because they do a whole range. You get about 10 in a pack. But people make these with paper plates, with spinners, and also with just cardboard. But what we do want to do as children evolve, as you heard with the drive-through blending, children are beginning to discriminate individual sounds. And then when they move on, we begin to introduce things like consonant blends. And this is a little bit further into the program, but I wanted to show you how we move on. Because remember in that first slide, we had strategy, and you understood that those three letters came together to make one sound. So I'm just showing you progression now, progression. And I think we might stop now so that you can have our 10-minute break. Is that correct? Am I at the right time for the break? I see there's a question, so I'll just tackle that question. How often should we revise the letter sounds in a week, as you said earlier? Okay, so for example, if I was introducing 3 letter sounds a week, I would be constantly going back to my letter sounds that I've already taught. These would be through blending activities where I would use something like the word bank so that I'm using only what the children have learned. I'd look at my word bank. If I was doing the first group, I'd say, what can I do? Okay, I can use words like nap. All right, n-appa, nap, n-ipa, nip. So this is where you fly through the first few groups and you think this is easy. I'm only having to revise like 6 letters, 12 letters, 18 letters. But can you imagine when you get to letter 36? And that's why you need to be using an approach to revision where you're using words that have every single letter you have already done within your revision. You're not introducing anything that is unfamiliar. And a good thing about the internet is you can say spellings or words up to group 4, spellings or words up to group 7. So I used to start the class, like you saw with the video yesterday with the dictation, where I would say, okay, do the actions, read the word, how many sounds, and I pick them from my word bank and I'm revising. I may even use the frieze, the frieze that we have here with the letters that we have, and I'll point at random ones. Maybe I've done 24 letters. Give me the sound, give me the action, blend this one and this one and this one together. And you become quite proficient at doing really rapid revision. However, all the work that you're doing in the books or similar resources are continuously opening up this spiral where you are teaching and it's consolidation, teaching and consolidation. So you are not explicitly revising every single sound unless in your assessments you recognize that half the class did not get that sound. I'm going to have to go back. So I hope that answers your question. So I think we'll have a cup of tea now and resume in 10 minutes. Is that correct?
Sure, Miss Yon, you can do that.
Okay, thank you. And if there's any questions, please put them through and I'll address them when I come back. And have a little break now. And then we'll move on to the other groups pretty quickly. Okay, thank you everybody. I hope you managed to at least have a walk around and a cup of tea and disconnect for a moment. So we really don't have the forum to ask this explicitly, but what I would like you to think about is what language and creativity you involve within your teaching, as this is very much part of the program as well, looking at how you can use the resources in a creative way. And I hope that over the past hour or so that you've been able to get some ideas. But referring back to yesterday when I said, you could use the books, you could use the stories, but this is a free wallpaper that I have taken from the Jolly Learning site, and you can apply this to any visual that connects to your language. But here I'm trying to connect it all. And what I'm going to say is, to the children, I'd say, have a look, have a look and identify a few things, like we have B for bread, we have the B for bee, we have D for duck. Can you do it? Duck. I've got the K and the K, and I'm using it as an I spy initial sounds, and also can they hear the sounds. What I would also do is use my online facility tool to cover up and say what's missing. What's missing. And again, it's getting children to be focused and on task, and also it's a little game, so I'm using the resources in a different way. Additionally, if I wanted to think about how I can reuse a resource, this is a free download as well. And using my PowerPoint, there's a free dictation app there on the side, a free dictation facility. I may say, what's the sound here? What's the sound? Let's check. So I haven't bought any expensive equipment. I've just used a free downloadable. I've used a facility on my PowerPoint presentation, Microsoft one, and I've got this resource that I can use over and over again and add to. It's just taking a bit of time, but again, I can revise letter sounds. Okay, we don't want to go through them all. No. And if we were to look at Storybook, again, you can use any visual to do this. How do I extend out from this just being a resource for a story to revise the qua sound? Look at all the information that's on here. If we were in a conference style training, I'd be asking you to write this all down, but we really don't have the time. But on here, thinking about how we can extend this out. We have a picnic, so we could talk about food. We could also talk about cooking. How is bread made? Because most families are eating bread. We could look at nature, animals in nature, and also their habitats or surroundings. We could even extend it to mini beasts, smaller creatures, naming. We could use initial sounds for spider, ant, lizard. We could do stories about wild animals. There's quite a big selection of those. Seasons, again, we're looking at science concepts, textures, and textiles and colours. Sorry, I can't get that word out. And then look at these. These are more free resources, and I love these. That these are I Spy, and again, they can fit with your initial letter sounds and even vocabulary. And here you have a match-up. You can incorporate these into your classes, but they are, again, revision in a different way. And the children are revising and they don't really know that they're revising, and also they're doing cross-curricular learning. So you can add these to your toolkit. So as you can see with all the examples I've given you, that you're touching on all of these at the same time. Maybe the percentage is higher in one area to another area, but this is what we need to be looking at with all your classes, that it's not simply, I'm just using a book. Because if we anchor a child to a desk and we're just getting them to do pages and pages to satisfy the need that there's production, how much comprehension is going on and how much learning is going on. So we need to be touching these elements all the time. And this could be something as simple as using a facility like this. As my children progressed, we would use this one sentence structure, the cat on the mat. Very, very simple. Onset rhymes, there's tricky words. And as we progress, as I mentioned before about using familiar sentences, I'd ask them, how many tricky words, how many can you find? We have the, okay. Can you find the letter sound like k? Here we go, cat. Find the end blends that are the same. So here we have at, and we have at, and I could have children underlining this, or if I'd written it on the board. And then I could just rub out, this, and put mat there, the mat on the, and I could change this to a sound, rat. I could be manipulating these initial sounds to change the word. It may be a nonsense sentence, but what they're doing is they're playing with sounds. I could then even make it more challenging as children's knowledge grows. We've got the cat on the mat. We remember this. What if we change the k for a b, right? The bat on the mat. What if we change the for a all right, the bat on the hat? What if we change the verb to the past? You know, if we say the cat sat on the mat. And what if we change the cat to he or she? So this one sentence has them the full arc of starting at maybe 3 years old and up to 6 years old. And I'm adding different concepts. But it's a familiar sentence. I can extend it. I can make it bigger. I can look at different points like punctuation, capital letters, adjectives. And again, it's reading and comprehension. And this would take up a couple of minutes in my class. So let's revise the sounds that we know. We've done the first 3 groups, and we're going on to group 4 now. And the one thing I'm going to say to you is, what do you notice about this group? If you'd like to just add to the comment box, what do you notice about this 4th group? Anyone? Do we have anybody who'd like to volunteer? Here we go. We've got one. How often should we revise the letter sounds in the week, as you said earlier? Okay, is that this one or? Okay, that's an old question. All right, what you will notice about, I don't know if there's a question. New question. Yeah. Most of vowels, yes. What we are looking at here is something that we call the digraphs. It's 2 letters that make one sound, except for the j sound in the middle. And we have a and then j. And actually, let's move on to the visuals because that will help actually. So as we progress on from group 4, usually at group 4, we tend to slow down. We slow down because we're looking at a difficult concept. We also have to make sure that these are done very, very well, because when we do this sound a bit later on, we're going to be introducing the alternatives that this does have. So within this group, you're going to be looking at these digraphs where we have 2 letters making one sound. This can often put the fear into teachers when they think, how am I going to do this? The same way that we've done the letters before. We introduce a story, but we make the point of saying to the children, look, we have 2 letters, but they make one sound. How are we going to do this on our arm? So we have the A sound. The children are cupping their ear, A, and we have the word here, pain. And I'm going to do that on my arm. They're familiar with using their arm now. And I'm going to use one finger, 2 fingers, A, 1 finger, pain. How many sounds? 3. And you can see that here, pain. Now, the one thing about this particular digraph is that we don't have any words in English that end in A. It's not, we might have words that end in I, like ski, but they're not English words. So that's a good thing to point out to children. We may begin, like with aim, we have rain, snail, and train, but we don't end with that. So children learn the action A, and then we have to work on them having lots of sight recognition and hearing this. So if we look at this group, we have A, which is like jelly on the plate. Goat. Now you have to start sounding like the Queen when we're speaking this, because we don't want a common thing, which is go at or coat, where children are breaking it down into the wrong sounds. We want goat, goat, moat. And the action is this, just like the billy goat, his beard, goat, oh. The next one is I. The captain says I. And then another one is E-or. E-or. And they have to discriminate here, because when we say tree, remember the sound for E before was an was eh. We don't say tree, eh. We say tree. It's a long E sound. And if we're looking at a word like fork, we don't say f or k. We say f or k. Those two come together. Now, people may disagree and say that's not what I hear, but what we found for spelling, it's easier that if you have a word where you have the O over here and the N over there, they're separate sounds. But when we have the O and the R together, they tend to be produced as one sound. And it's the same with the E. If you have several E's in a word, when they're not together, they're eh. But when we get two together, it's a long vowel sound. So this is where, as I mentioned, we slow down. And in the books, we need to do this where they can understand, as you can see here, where they're getting the practice like they've been having. Additionally, we have some vocabulary, so we're using it, but we're also using the sound buttons to start identifying the sounds. You may find in your planning that this would incorporate a little bit more revision than it has done with groups 1 to 3. And that's pretty normal. And that's why we often say when you're planning up to Christmas, it's good to get the first 3 groups in. And then if your academic year works September to June, perhaps, once Christmas is out the way, then reduce down the amount of groups you're going to try and teach in that next term. You may just focus on the 6 sounds and do them really well. So that's something you need to consider about with your planning. Now, another big asset, going back to what I mentioned yesterday, was how the teacher's book can help you understand how these pages work when we're using not only the phonemes, but when we move to digraphs. It'll give you everything you need to know on how to do them. However, again, it goes back to that multisensory approach that we were looking at before. Another good way is having the vowel hand, and we tend to teach the long vowels first to children. We say A, E, I, O, U, A, E, I, O, U, but at the same time, we should be teaching the short vowel sounds. So we have A, E, O, A. A, E, I, O, U. Children need to know the short vowel sounds and the long vowel sounds. So this little activity where we say, well, when 2 vowels go walking, the first one goes to talking, you'll see how that fits in, that little rhyme. And they need to hear it in not only the words you say, but also dictation. But a way to do this is, apart from having these activity sheets, which can consolidate, but again, as I mentioned earlier, you don't want them to take up too much of your time. They can be good for homework and something that you can do online, as I mentioned about these, where you can block off and you can just do what you want with those. But when we get to the, I'm just going to go back a bit actually, to the vowel hand. Using something like a vowel hand in your classes, children, or you can get the parent to help draw around the hand. And what you can be saying to children is, with the word cat, what vowel sound can you hear? K, a, t, and they can go ah. Right. Cup, k, a, p, cup. Yeah. Okay. And if they've learned the diagrams, you can say, okay, how about goat? G, o, t. And they realize it. Oh. Train. Ch, r, a, this sound. So they're listening for vowel discrimination. Lots of activities where you're manipulating, like the drive-through sounds, where you're doing them with the short vowel and the long vowel. We need to get this right, where they're hearing both of these, and they're also recognizing the sounds and they're a grapheme that fits. Because as we move on, as I'm going to show you here, we then go on to the alternative sounds. And although the alternative sounds are not explicitly taught during the first 3 years or the first 3 books, children are made aware of these sounds for when they move on to the grammar components. And what they do understand and get to recognize is, first, we're going to teach everything that is in the red column here. A, E, I, O, U. And then we have other sounds, or, oi, ow. So you'll be familiar with the long sounding vowels, and you'll also have these additional ones because these can also have alternative spellings. So we have A as in train, and we have A as in day, or as in make, or made, or play, as you see there. The long E sound as in these words. We have the I sound, but then we have that complicated I sound in light or night. And then we have when children learn that the Y sound becomes at the end like a vowel, like in my. We have the O sound, like in goat or moat or coat. Then we have that sound also with snow and ho. You, dew, few. So as you see, and as you may recall with that code I showed you the other day, we need to be able to look forward and then work backwards. We need to know where we're taking them, but we also need to know that we're teaching these correctly before we then move on to the alternatives. So as I reminded you, you have these, your first page, the second page, as you can see, we're building up, but this is mainly for your information because these are very, very complex concepts for very young children. However, these are what are covered in the grammar as the children move on. So you can see it's quite a big trajectory and the children do it very confidently with the right materials. And there is yet another page, but I've stopped here. And you can see just how complex English is when we see it like this, laid out in its most simple terms and then its most complex. And this is where we get children to after 6 years of grammar. So first we teach the letter sounds and then the corresponding shape, the letter shapes, the phonemes and the graphics. And then by the time we introduce the alternatives, children have the skills in place to start decoding. So although for us, we may think about how am I going to do that? We've built the strategies in that they're breaking the words down and they're identifying them into units of sound. And so it's easy for them to manipulate this when they start reading. Additionally, we need to have the reading and writing to consolidate this language that they're learning, the new sounds that they're learning and the alternative ones. And we have to do it in a systematic way. So they're building up this spiral again. So we have a chart. And again, this is a big poster, but what I often do, I used to cut this down. And you can see we have this little card that you can purchase or you can make your own one. And the children have the sounds that they would learn and then the alternatives, and they have the actions as well. Or you can have something like this that you can make yourself, where they have the first sound they're going to learn, which is A, and then they can move on. And what I would say is that when, we have a question, 1 second. Vowel pairs, okay. What I would say is that if you're introducing something like the poster, I used to cut this up so that children weren't getting too much information at the same time, because there's an awful lot of information here. So if we were doing the A sound, I'd be working on the A sound in snail and train, but I would make it clear that it also had friends that had very, very similar types of vowels in them, but they all made the same sound. So that when we did get on to teaching explicitly these other variations, they were, yeah, I remember that. I remember learning the A sound, and I remember that it has friends that don't have the same letters, but they have the same sound. So I used to do that. I wasn't explicitly teaching the A in day or the A in make, but I was drawing children's awareness that there is a connection, so that when we did move on, there would be some connection. Additionally, what I would do is make sure there was plenty words that were coming up on my board or within my teaching text. You can target text on the internet where you can say A words or words or I words, and you'll find there's text that just focus on that and children have to identify them. So that was one tactic. And also within the books, you will see that we have these activities that build up the discrimination of the short vowel sound and the long vowel sound. And again, with the visual cues. Again, there's lots of resources out there you can download to support that. But you also have to recognize the importance of doing this, often seen as laborious, over and over and over again. Why am I having to teach this over again? Well, it's important to get it right, because then when we get children moving on to the alternative sounds, they've got to be pretty sure that they're making the right choice. So, here we are moving on, where we're explicitly teaching to now giving children alternatives on what they need to be using. They have moved on. It'll have taken some time to go from this sound to this sound. We haven't done it overnight, but what we have done is interlaced it within the workbooks, and the children are constantly making connections to the first sound that they learned as we progress. And we would work through this together. And here we have consolidation of A and Oi. A and Oi. And as you can see, there's some strategies that children work out. Some children begin to work out that the Y at the end tends to be the last and final letter. You can use various strategies, but you never say they're the rule, because we often have that these rules get broken. And here, this is a complete consolidation page where children have lines within these alternatives, and they have to make sure that they elect the correct word. And they have them here. But again, it's a visual, and if a child was putting the wrong one, then you'd know that they're not reading correctly and they're not learning the diagrams correctly. So this is a little activity, and I'm aware of the time, so I'm trying to get through this, where I could say to children in the classroom, like a bingo, I say the word and you find the diagraph. So I could say, for example, train, and they'd have to circle this. I could say arm, and they have to circle here. So the idea is that children have to find they'd have to write it and then do an arrow to the correct, or put it underneath the correct diagram. Then I could go to the alternative sounds, and I could say, okay, is it A or Oi or and they have to choose another word. I could say jade, which is an alternative of A, and it'd have to connect with that one. Or I could say train, plate. So as you can see, what we're doing is, first of all, finding the words that fit with the digraphs, and then afterwards the alternatives. So they're making the connections with the sounds, but also discrimination of how they're spelled. So this is quite an advanced type of game, one that we would have done if we were in a conference together. So as you can see, these are children's vowel hands that they have in class, and they are very, very, very effective for when we're running through listening, goat pointing, right, put pointing, pit pointing, pat or hop or hope, where they're listening to that manipulation of the sounds. And also there's a song. At the end of the songbook, we have a song. And what are the problems? Well, the problems is that they tend to get rushed through very, very quickly. That can also be an issue. I'm just looking, we have a question. Is there a sequence to be followed when teaching consonant blends? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. And first, what I would say is the consonant blends that you're doing have to fit in with the sound groups that you are doing. So you'll probably find by group 3, you will find that you can do the floss rules, which are the double consonants. There's blends, and you'll also be able to do some of the initial blends, like where you have T, S together. So it's about your objectives for teaching. That first of all, are you going to teach the sounds and then introduce them as saying these are blends or initial letters and end blends. But as you saw with that video yesterday, how quickly children can understand the difference between onsets and rhymes. And I've used quite technical language with children. I've used phonemes and graphemes and digraphs and trigraphs, and they've been able to understand and navigate these pretty quickly. So you can introduce them quite quickly into the program. So as we see here, in a comparative way, and not only, we need to teach digraphs not only in isolation, but also, as we see here, they can hear and see the sound manipulation. So we have see, me, which is a tricky word, real, key, feel. They need to see all of these as we progress along. However, if I've done the long E sound and I've done the tricky word, me, that'd be a good one. If I have done the I sound, we can do all of these, but don't introduce something that they have not done just yet. So let's have a little break from me speaking.
Vowel team TV. When vowel teams go a-walking, the first vowel does the talking. A. Made. When vowel teams go a-walking, the first vowel does the talking. B. Team. When vowel teams go a-walking, the first vowel does the talking.
So as you can see, this is a strategy that we use, that when two vowels are together, look at the first one first, and that will give you an indication on the direction of what you need to pronounce. As somebody has said, short vowels and long vowels, which is easier to learn quickly? I would say the short vowels get learned pretty quickly because it's one unit of sound. And as we move on to the long vowels, children can get stuck on looking at them as two individual units of sound. They could be going a, yeah, a, yeah, and not recognize that we have one unit of sound. So that's something they have to learn, that we move on, like we have s, r, a, it's not s, r, a, y. So that's what you need to slow down and introduce that concept. But we've spent a lot of time investing in just looking at one letter, one sound. And now we're moving on to something which is a little bit complex, which is two graphemes and one sound. So that's a handy one for Get to Way for Children. And now we need to look at how we can look at visuals and using something like Magic E or Silent E, which you're all familiar with. And again, this is a great one that connects with the short vowel sound and how we manipulate the long vowel sound. And we have the Magic E wand, where things like bit becomes bite, can becomes cane. And actually, children get this concept incredibly quickly, quicker than I could imagine, because once they start to recognize, especially if it's in the colors, that this short vowel in bit, the minute I add the Magic E, it's a long. So we go, and this is how I used to do it. Bit, bite, can, cane, cap, cape. So I'd get them to do the short vowel and then physically do the long one. And it got them to understand about slowing down, also slowing down so you could hear the difference. So you have cut, cute, thin, fine. So not only was it a physical movement, but they were also hearing this. And these are little foldovers. It's amazing, these little pieces of paper that you can fold the E and hide it and open it up. And also visuals here where they can see it. Really, really important they see this and they get it very quickly. This is one of the concepts they do get quickly. Now, as we're moving on, this is where children have got knowledge of alternatives and digraphs. And I want you to see how they're using something like this to cope with the dictation, but also with writing, and also using the more complex area of synthetic phonics.
Get your picture word card underneath your sound card. The whiteboard up on your lap with your pen and your rubber. Oh, let's see everyone who's ready. I wonder who's got their things where I ask. Your sound card should be right in front of your leg so you can look down and see it. Turn your sound card over. Right, let's say the sounds in that top row. You ready? We're going to point. Look at mine so you can see where I want you to point. We're going to point at the lines that are above the sound. They're the ones that you've learnt first. You'll find out about these another time. So put your finger on it and let's say each one. A, O, I, U, D. Just stop there. Arabella, can you see you're looking at me? I know you're paying attention, but what you're trying to do is teach your eyes to see those letters and say that sound that we're saying. So get your sound card, okay, and find the A. The boy's got his hand on his ear like this. Let's go back to the start, everyone. A, O, I, U, E, O, U, and down the bottom to where the boy's holding up the weight, the yellow one in the bottom row. Let's do those ones. Well done. Okay, the first word I'd like you to write is wheat. Wheat. Let's sound it out. Good. Let's do it one more time. Now remember, quirk is the sound that we've just done. Watch one more time how to write it. Curly curl, back to the start, straight down, and a little flick up. Then it's an up. Starts at the same place as the quirk, straight down, curve it up, straight down. We're going to do quirk, it, off you go. We're doing quirk first. Good boy. Good girl. What's next?
I'm not going to play all of this because it's quite a long video, but what I wanted you to get was the essence of how this teacher is using all the different ways of getting the children engaged. Yes, they're doing a dictation, but she's allowing them to use their sound cards so they have that confidence. She's also modeled the way that the graphemes are done, reminding them of what it's a new sound that they have also done. They've got the book there as a memory trigger, and they're also working and helping each other. So she goes through several words like this and the children are gaining confidence. But as you see, she started the class revising, and it's really important to whiz through that so you're bringing children back. When children get more confident with the quert sound, she may mix up some of the dictation or the word bank words so that she's revising some of the previous digraphs and continuing. So I won't play all this because there's a lot of it, but what I can do is give you the link so that you can take your time to look at how teachers are using the materials. And what you will see is that it's quite passive and it flows and the children are engaged. Now, what I mentioned earlier was about finding things on the internet that could address what you're working on. And as you can see here, this is quite a good one where we're looking at the alternatives, the digraphs, the long vowel, but we're also looking at alternatives where children have really moved ahead. They've progressed forward. And this could also be an evaluation for you and also an assessment of what do I need to revise. So it's just a very simple one where children circle the correct spelling. Of course, comprehension comes into this, but it's not too challenging. And additionally here, something that children could do at home, they don't really even need to have a plate. They could just have a circle of paper or cardboard. And we have these very, very cheap resources. But look, or getting children to work through lists that could be flashed up on the computer or in your classroom, and they have to elect using the right alternative and picking the pegs. So it's simple interactive activities. And this isn't a video. What it is a screenshot of a guy called Mr. Thorne. And this is the title, Mr. Thorne Does Phonics. And he's done an awful lot on YouTube, going through all the different phases and some excellent ideas that can be incorporated into your classroom, and definitions. How to teach the children between the Q used in cute and Q used in quick. Well, we're going to get to that. Q, okay. So we're going to get to those sounds as we get to them. We're in the other sound groups between Q, which is in U, and Qua. They don't sound the same. We have Qua and Q. So we'll get to that. So I'd advise you to just jot his name down, and he does everything. Mr. Thorne Does Phonics. He has his own page, and he's been doing so for about 10 years now. I'm just keeping an eye on the questions that are coming through. And additionally, another one for if you're looking for something with gamification where you can build your own resources so that children are interactive is something called WordWall. And WordWall is a platform that's free. And there's also a community where people have put up all the activities to do with the sound groups, and that can be a spinning wheel, it can be lottery, it can be flicking cards around. There's a whole range, and it's not only for phonics. You can put your key language, your learning concepts can all be embedded into existing games or ones that people have already developed, or you can make your own. Free to join up, and I use WordWall frequently, and as you can see here, it's CVC and high frequency words, and it just adds another element to your teaching, and also for children who need a different way to learn. More visuals, again, I can't emphasize enough the importance, but I do recognize that if you're out of school, you may need to go for something as simple as this, which is a lolly stick, and the children have them where they can point to different words. And here we're doing all the A sounds. It's a very visual thing for them. Again, displays in classroom are highly important, that they can see the changes. And little games like this where children are using flashcards, where they're moving, just like we did at the beginning of this session, where the children are in the chairs and they're moving around, that internalism where they're looking and they're checking, that again is a great asset for children to get this up here in their sequence. You can see the progression of the pages. And as you can see, we move on from how the sound, we haven't done these yet in the groups, goes on to the sound that we have in bird. Or the, and here, the sound is in Turkey. And we have or. And these are difficult because we have like talk, which we move on is the same as the or sound, and A, how all these progress. So this is just a quick overview. I'm not going into these specifically, but it's just the expanse of how far the program goes. So what you are seeing is how at the beginning, it's very quick and pacey. And I hope what you see now is that as children mature and they have their skills and strategies, we're able to introduce some quite complex concepts. And these are games that you can play online. I'm very aware that you're having to teach online. And what I did do with something like this, everything I'm showing you, I've tested out, is I've given it a number. I've given it a number, and I take the number or roll the dice. I have a dice in a jar, 2 dice or 3 dice, and the children get given a number and they have to read the word. Additionally, here, reading practice, again, comparative, where they can compare exactly the sounds, A, great, as this is really quite moved on now. And then we move back to the single vowel. And this is the jar, the magic jar, where if you're online, you can have all the words you want children to read in a color, on colored paper or colored post-its. And if they say, I want a green one, you take it out and there's no fighting. You know, I didn't want that word. Well, you picked a green one. There's a green one. Do you want a red one? That's that one. Again, I'm trying to make the games interactive and fun for the children to use. Now, you've got to be careful with some of the activities that you download, because we have this one, which is we have the A sound, and the children are putting in rain, nail, pain, snail, and train. What are they actually doing? And the only thing they are doing is filling a gap. You know, they're not learning how to read the word. They're not learning about how to use the the alternative sound or the digraph. All we're doing is just filling the gap activity. So things like this are not really helpful for children. And so we try and avoid where they're just filling a gap and it doesn't have any consolidation and it doesn't have them doing any activities other than this. So what do we need to remember teaching the vowels? As you can see, it's revision, but that's built into the material. They need to hear and make comparisons between the short vowel and the long vowel, and that falls into place not only with activities, with what you say and the reading material. Beginning the writing helps consolidate this because we target it to fit with the words that they're doing. Again, that multisensory approach where we're touching on all these elements, and also passive and explicit teaching, building up the skills. And it's quite a process, and we're doing it really well by, look at this. You know, we don't want to teach the alternative sounds in isolation. We want to be doing something. And this is a big issue with some of the implementation of Jolly Phonics, is that people do their training and they come out fully aware of the song, the action, and maybe doing blending and segmenting, but they don't go down into the deeper level of how am I going to do this, the alternatives. And maybe that's something in the future we can spend a little bit more time on, because it is a big area as an extension of this training, to look at how we do the alternatives and looking at how you plan for these. So there's a lot of text here, but it's mainly what you need to think about and mainly something that we could look at in the future. Working with children with specific learning difficulties, how we may need to slow down. Additionally, how the curriculum builds up as children move along, and you may have reduced time to work on synthetic phonics. And also giving yourself, this is the really important self, giving yourself time to understand how your class is working. Not every class is the same. I have done 3 classes in the group, and each class is a different pace, and I'm trying to keep them on track. And again, about using the activities, we don't want to overdo it, but we recognize the importance of it. So let's move on to how we plan for this. And again, this is something that we could do maybe in another session, is about how you do your sound groups, and then you move on to the digraphs. What do we need to think about? Ages and stages, of course. So rushing through the groups too quickly, we're not giving children sufficient time to work out that there's units of sound before they move on to doing the digraphs. And having the secure foundation is really, really needed before we move on with this concept. And you've got to have your revision there. Additionally, when we look at all of this, we have to make sure we've assessed, and also that children are using the strategies that we have been showing them, blending and cementing, and not guessing. This is what happened pre-using synthetic phonics, where children spent a lot of time just trying to guess the word in the context that it was. So what you need to avoid is how much time you're going to, if you're going to do activities, what are the outcomes? What am I going to gain? I mentioned right at the beginning yesterday about using mnemonics. Mnemonics work very well with native speakers, but something like a mnemonic like the "ite" words, where we get children to do "I've got hairy legs," can be really, really confusing, where they have to remember the first initial sound to remember how to spell something. So be careful about mnemonics. And also that you're systematically building up. And it's really important here where we say about knowledge and confidence. So it's also your knowledge and confidence. I don't want you to get to this point where you're thinking, wow, I was doing all right with groups 1 to 3. Now Yvonne has brought in these other groups and I'm beginning to think, how am I going to do this in my class? you would be really surprised at how quickly the children can assimilate the knowledge, but also you will know how yourself when to speed up and when to slow down. So the children are here with their groups. As you can see, there's quite a lot. And using something like this, I could get them to randomly revise, like I, E, L, F, I, O, G. And I can either say, right, let's do the actions. E, A, D, 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 A, O. And they do it as quick as that. Boom, 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 boom. They're really, really quick at doing this. And then I can get them to blend. Okay, follow the cursor. S, A, P, sap, ch, tin, hip, mum. And I would be doing this in class as my warm-up, and the children are revising. They're revising all the sounds that they've done. So let's move on to group 5. And as you can see here, we have that consonant blend there, ng, and we also have the u and the oo. So I'm trying to whiz through now, I'm aware of the tone. So as you notice here, I've highlighted these because, again, these are ones where you would have to pay a little bit of attention. The z sound is pretty obvious. We have buzz. And again, we go back to the floss rule where the children are seeing 2 consonants with 1 sound. So b, a, z, buzz, bzz. And again, it's a sound that is pretty pure, like we have zoo and fuzzy. There's not too many words with Z in, so that's okay. Now with wh, again, children need to know this because we also have many words as we move on, like the word right, which is a W in front of it, and it's silent. But the children need to just practice words with that. And this one, ng. Now, as I mentioned, we've put these together because we don't have in an individual, that would be and then g, g. Put them together because when we're spelling, it comes out as 1 sound, strong. So here we'd have, before we do any consonant blends, we would identify the unit of sounds like s, ch, r, o, ng. And then later on, as children progress, you could have that as the 3 as a consonant blend there, str. And that's an obvious trajectory there. Now, again, this is problematic because in some countries it can confuse it with the W, the W sound, V and W, V and W. So maybe you need to practice and slow down if this is something with your country. And then we have ooh, 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 and it's like a cuckoo clock moving backwards and forwards. Again, in the materials that we use, this is identified with small O's and big O's. And the idea is that there's no difference in the spelling, it's about the pronunciation. I can't remember somebody explicitly teaching me that book was a short one, but hook was a long one. You got book, look, hook, took, and it's all a short double O sound. And then we have moon, soon, shoot, tooth, and you can hear the difference. And again, I use the strategy of book, moon, hook, soon, so children could hear that. But for reading, we initially start with that and it falls into place. And is it curious how we cannot remember how we learned these things? And again, some very easy activities for you to do in class or at home where children are using Fruit Loops or cereal, something that is quite hands-on for them to understand cool, food, moon, pool, so they can get the understanding and also the discrimination. And this is mainly for pronunciation with these ones. So quickly moving on, because with that group, it's pretty straightforward and it recovers a lot of what we've done with looking at double consonants, and the children have done, is looking at tricky words. And with tricky words, these are built into the program and they're done in group by group. And as you can see here, we have this beautiful, beautiful tricky word kind of like hat with flowers. Many people make their own, but they need to be visual. They're what we used to call sight words, and children need to see them so that they can reproduce them. And even if we're doing dictation, you don't take them down, keep them up, because the more they see them, the more they'll be able to write them, and they'll be able to then not to use that as a way of supporting them. Some of them are decodable. You know, I often hear tricky words are not decodable. Some of them are. Some of them have the ability that we can say the at is, but others are totally different. Like we have he, which is really like this: he, one, cough. And again, we've inherited the spelling. We haven't changed, even though the pronunciation or whatever. So we call them tricky words. And children learn these in groups. Now, learning the groups is really important because they start with the easiest, and this is incorporated into the reading material. Again, any of the materials that you get that are decodable readers will generally follow the groups that are done. There are different words like the Dolch list and everything. You may be familiar with those. They don't run in the same sequence. So you just got to be sure that the materials that you use follow more or less the same sequence with tricky words. I'm just going to show you something that really works with young children where they can repeat. I'm not going to play it all. Oh, sorry, this is something I mentioned it's not the video I thought it was. This is Sue Lloyd, and Sue Lloyd, who is the co-author of Jolly Phonics, has got her own website. So I'm just going to show you the introduction.
It is important for the children to keep blending and segmenting words that use the new and previously taught letter sounds, in the same way as in steps 1 and 2. So that the children become fluent at these skills with the new letter sounds. And up until now, all the teaching has been with regular words that can be worked out by blending the letter sounds. But now the children need to understand that some words can be awkward and initially slightly more difficult to read. We call them tricky words. These so-called tricky words are sometimes irregular, such as with these words: 2, said, 1. Now, the W in 2 is most unusual, and the children just have to learn it. This word says said, should do, and it says said. I mean, probably we used to say said a long time ago from the verb to say, but nowadays we say said. And this one is most unusual. You can hear a w and an a, but there's no sign of that in the letters. They just have to learn it.
So I've given you the link to Sue's website, and additionally there's free downloadables, and she has a very comprehensive one. She set up her website about 2 years ago to accommodate all the people like ourselves who need to have a little bit more broken down into a more logical structure. So this is one that I'd recommend, and Sue has put an awful lot into this in that it comes over in a very logical way. So, you know, with time restrictions, I can't show you the whole video, but I do hope that you will have a look at her website. And this is how we give them to the children. They have their tricky word tree, and they can also cut these out, and we have little boxes or envelopes so that children can be taking them out and reading them. One of the most effective things about having something like this, where you have the words in a line or on the tree or however you want to do them, is that when the children know them really, really well, they can colour them in. You know, it's hugely empowering if you can say, right, I can read 10 of these and I've only got 2 to go, or I can read 5 of these. So this is what we give children to build up in their folder, or you can have them doing post-its at home. But again, as she said, they just have to learn them. Many children learn that the E sound, for example, when we have it in a capital I, he has no friends and he's always alone. And it can be tricky for children because when they see something that starts with a capital I, I've just learned that it's a capital I has no friends, and you're telling me it. So we need to clarify some of these things, but they begin to learn. And what you will notice here is that we're using the same rhythm: he, she, me, we, B, they all have that long E sound. So it's in a logical order. And here we'll see where children are beginning to recognize, all right, we have k, o, m, come. And that E is changing the first vowel. So we're putting our strategies in place. And as you can see, a beautiful display, and you can see as we go down all the things that we need to see them in a context. They are included in the dictations and built up with the dictation sentences. They only use what the children have learned in each group. Again, a lot of the websites give you downloadables on tricky words, and they're color coded, so you can say, well, we learned that with the blue group, or we learned that with the green group. And it's a progressive approach, just like having the flashcards. And as I mentioned yesterday, when we first start, and you may recognize that these are from the very, very first group that we did, but I started saying the to the words where it is applicable. So the children were beginning to hear tricky words right at the beginning, but I wasn't explicitly teaching them. And you can see some of the progression with the books where we have like a word search. Again, that's again making the connections between the word and looking for the graphemes. The look, cover, write activity, which again is repetition, but they're colouring in, they're also making the connections, and it continues on. So you can see these activities are pretty boring, the tricky word ones, but then we complement them with all the other things that we are doing in class. So what we want is to build up children's knowledge using tricky words progressively, and this has to be from the bottom up, like revision, consolidation, planning and assessments. What we also need to do, so I'm thinking about the time, is incorporate these into games. So you can do this without using like Jolly Phonics, and you can source out the materials for yourself. And that's a way of doing it. Or you can go with Jolly Phonics and have all the resources more or less sorted out for you. But you know, people equally have done this type of training, and they've found the resources they need to get themselves going, and that is just great. You know, it's a matter of taking what you've done, what you've seen, and applying it into your teaching practice. The trouble with tricky words is we tend to fly them too quickly and not recognize that for the children who've been learning that shape has a sound. I'm suddenly asking you to look at the whole word. So we're doing the sight word approach, the whole word approach, and it needs a context, because these type of words on their own have no meaning. It's only when we put them in a sentence we can give them a meaning. And also things that you can do online is, you know, you can cut this up and you can have them on a PowerPoint where they connect them. Also throw in a dice activity where they have to read them. And again, the colouring in. And children can make their own one. And again, a simple activity, which again, you can have in your classroom. We have the sentence strips and the children have to elect the right type of tricky word to fit. Comprehension, they're using grammar, it's writing in a way, and this can even be done online, where if you had these in colours that were different to these, they'd have to pick the right colour and say it and read it, and also highlight other things that are within your sentence. You could have them breaking down this CVC word, there's the tricky word, what about this tricky word, and punctuation. So there's quite a lot we can be doing. I'm just being aware that there's, here we go. And also we can see how, you remember how I brought this up for a writing? Now we can use this for also looking at tricky words, and here a tricky word activity. So I'm whizzing through these so that we can get to the end of the presentation. And here we're on to group 6, and you will notice that we have some consonant blends here going on. And I'm going to whiz through the sounds. Now, I'm not terribly concerned that you leave this training without having the sounds correct or the actions, because there's a plethora of resources on YouTube for you to support this, and I'll give you the links. But we have y as in yogurt. We really need to make sure they understand this before they go on to understanding that at the end of a word, it becomes like an E sound, like daddy and mummy. X-ray, X, we don't have that many words beginning with X. Ch, Very simple. There's no problem with that one. Ch. And also, oh, here we go. I'm just going to, I quickly put this in last night so that you could see how children need to know that the y sound can then become a long E sound, but they progress with that, like merry or by. So we have that manipulation further on, but at the moment we're just looking at it at the first part. Then we have shh, shh. Again, it's not a difficult one for children, but then we move on to and v. And many teachers have said to me, this is really difficult for me. I don't know whether I should use a th sound or a th sound. I'm not aware that there's two ways of doing this. And the way it's done is like this, or thin, that, 3, with, cloth. I don't know if you can hear the difference. However, if you're really, really not secure with this, then just go with the th sound. Because sometimes mispronunciation, children hear a F, an artificial th sound. So here we have the and the However, we don't go around going like this, moth, that, 3, them, thin. And you can find resources like there is on YouTube. And this one explains the difference with words. And again, it's a
voiceless th sound.
Exactly. This is the voiceless one. But I'd say caution is needed here. I'm not going to play it all.
TH, thumb.
Now, I did put this in, not as a good example of something for you to use, but a bad example, because what it is doing is introducing the letter name, TH, thumb. That does not help the child at all.
TH, TH, thumb.
Okay, so this is a bad example because we want to say thumb, not TH. They haven't learned TH. That's the letter name. We want the letter sound, which is thumb. Again, if you're not confident about using these two, then you just go back to just doing the sound. As you can see, we've done lots and lots of different sounds now. We're going to move on to the final one. And the person who asked about the qu. So here we can see how Q and Queen have that. We have qu. Let me show you the stories that surround this. So we have qu, which is like this. A quack and queen. And children get to know how this mostly is at the front of words, but we can have them at the beginning if we're using different suffixes and things like that. But there's quack. So can you see here? How many sounds do we have? We have 3. Qu, a, k, quack. So children are really doing well here if they can identify the 3 sounds. And as we move on, can you imagine they're able to identify how many sounds in liquid and squirrel. Then we move on to ow, ow. And these are generally at the beginning or the middle of the word, like out or sour or cloud. Oi, they get to know oi. They tend to know oi sound very well from toy, but it's a completely different spelling. And again, it's not one that we end a word with, but it's certainly in the middle or at the beginning, like oink or oil or point. Again, that's sound discrimination. But let's have a look at Q. So we have the U sound. So again, I didn't particularly think that this is a very good example to show children because we've had qu, now we have q. So it's quite difficult for children to make that discrimination because we've heard that this is a k sound, k, q, q, and they're learning qu, queen, quick, and here they're learning q. So can you hear the slight differentiation in the pronunciation? It's not Q, Q. It's not like qu, queen, quick, Q. It's slightly different. So I'd have preferred if they'd used a different word here. And again, it's difficult to describe what the Q is. So we have U, then we have and we have ah. And this is the most unattractive movement there is, a child sticking their tongue out going ah. I'm just going to address the question that we have chat. Before schools need to teach letter names before letter sounds. Yes, and this is pretty common everywhere. If children has been to a nursery, children do start school with letter name knowledge with the alphabet song, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's not a bad thing. But what we do say is using this, a letter name and a letter sound. So I'm now going to teach you the letter sounds. So it's a good way, in one way, that children are exposed to understanding that little grapheme can have two different ways of approaching it. So that you're very true, they can do that. But once you start assimilating the sounds into it, it's easier. So after group 7, you can imagine the children have a huge amount of knowledge. Some of it will be more concrete than others because we haven't gone specifically into the alternatives, but we've made them aware. But what they will be doing is they will be using their skills, or you should be providing opportunity for them for their emerging reading and writing skills. We have whizzed through normally 3 years of teaching. So I don't want you to panic and think, how am I going to do this? If you give yourself 3 years to do something and do it well, that's a considerable amount of time. Additionally, there's countries where they spread this over a much longer time. So I think it would be really ambitious to try and do this in 1 year, but certainly 3 years seems to be the logic that most schools incorporate into their teaching. They don't use it as their only literacy support, but they have it combined into other areas because some curriculums need to demonstrate local stories, cultural things. They need to have these embedded into their literacy hour, even if it is in another language. So it can work as a parallel. It can be a parallel way of teaching literacy. And what we have to know is that, children have got all of this. So what are they ready for now? And generally we move on to grammar concepts where we've got everything that they did at the foundation stage, and they're now building it into really good grammar skills. Again, you may not explicitly use the grammar materials for your only literacy class, but they do a good job at supporting it. So that's what they're ready for. What I would say is that if you're in a school where children and the teachers, especially the teachers, have been trained in Jolly Phonics, it's hugely important that the teachers where the children are moving up to in primary, even if they are not using Jolly Phonics or Jolly Grammar in primary, the teachers understand the strategies that have been used. Otherwise, you've got all this information that is not being referred to as children are moving on. Even if you use another resource, even if you use a different style or approach. But if a teacher can show a child a word like train and they can't decode it, and they say, come on now, remember you did the A sound, remember that you did it on your arm, and you're bringing the child back to the skills and the strategies that we've put in. So it's quite important that everybody knows how this method works. And if we look on, question, where do I get the resources? All right, Jolly Learning, Amazon or local distributors. I can't really give you more advice than that because the dynamics of getting materials anywhere slowed down completely with the pandemic, but that seems to be and of course you have postage as well. So looking at local distributors is what you need to address first. Online, there are lots of free resources. First, have a look on Jolly Learning. And then we have Sparklebox and Twinkle, Primary Learning, YouTube. These are all places that have a lot of resources where you can build up your foundation knowledge on how you're going to use it. And getting started, look at the internet and YouTube, Sue Lloyd's website, and as Chris Jolly mentioned yesterday, the CPD training. The CPD training is 20 hours, and I can't remember how much it costs, but it goes through module. But the most important thing is start looking at the method. This is a program I've been showing you. The method is embedded in the program. So have a look at the method and how you want to use it. And apart from that, as Chris mentioned yesterday, here's the Sue Lloyd website if you want to make a note of that, about becoming a trainer. Please go off and use this and start teaching it, share it, go deeper into it. Becoming a trainer takes years, and over the pandemic, the most of the messages I've got is, how do I become a trainer? How do I become a trainer? I have been using this since 1998 in a variety of settings, in a variety of ages. And I still feel I'm learning. Every time I meet somebody new and they're using it in a different way, I'm learning. However, what I have got is that core of using it and understanding my mistakes and trying to help you not to reproduce those. So becoming a trainer takes time, and it also means you need to have that really deep understanding about how language works and how children view these coming together. So please take a note on Sue's website. And just for fun, we're just going to run through. I can't hear you, but I'm hoping you'll do the sounds with me. So let's randomly choose. We have O, D, I, S, O, Y, Oi, Ng, I, Qua, U, There's more, but I'm just running through these. And this is a game that you can play with your children once they've done all the sounds or getting through the sounds. So before we go, whoops, that's one of my emails. I'll just say to you, thank you very, very much. And have we got questions? Are there any questions? You must be exhausted listening to my voice. Are there any questions that we have before we close? I'm nearly on time. I'm amazed I kind of got it in time today. Oh, only 8 minutes over. Normally I'm like half an hour. So are there any questions? Now, what I will do is share with you my Facebook page, which has lots and lots and lots of activities that I post daily to help you all, synthetic phonics. And if there are any questions, I should imagine everyone is like absorbing all that information. And please ask now.
All the questions have been taken by you, Ms. Yvonne. Yes, Dr. Sampurna.
Ms. Anusia, there is a question on short vowels or long vowels. Which one is easier for kids to learn quickly?
Okay, so the short vowels are easier because we're looking at one unit of sound with a grapheme. So the children can identify that very, very quickly and very easily. But as we saw with the video, with the drive-through blending, we really got to make sure that they've got that discrimination, that they can tell which is an ah and oh or ooh, before we move on to the long vowel sounds. But curiously enough, children tend to know the long vowel sounds with the songs that are ah, they know these are A, B, they know it from the alphabet song. So there is some familiarity, and the short vowel sounds are much quicker, no doubt.
Thank you, Ms. Yvonne, for such a splendid and comprehensive workshop you've conducted, and people have really appreciated the practicality of the Jolly Phonics which you have presented in the 2-day workshop conducted by Amity Institute of Rehabilitation Sciences.
It was a lot to pack in, as you can imagine. This usually takes several days. And someone has just asked me what the scientific background of the group is. The scientific background is that children were able to use CVC words very, very quickly. So the first group, and this is what you will see if you look at other programs, they don't necessarily use the same sequence, but what they do is they make sure that within the first few groups we have short vowels so children can start making CVC words. That's the only scientific part about it. And certainly having the first few groups with units of sound before we move on to having 2 letters that make 1 sound. But what I will tell you very quickly is that there are publications that will have embedded phonics within the units, and they tend to just do random sounds. So you need a program that at least starts with consonants and vowels, so very quickly children can start understanding how to blend and segment. So that's the scientific bit about that.
Thank you so much. Yes, please. Yes, please go ahead.
I think that's it. Is there any more questions? No.
No.
Questions on the side.
That concludes the question and answer session. With this, may I now please invite Professor Dr. Jayanti Pujari, Dean Rehabilitation Sciences and Director, Amity Institute of Rehabilitation Sciences, to put forward the concluding remarks. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Anusha. And my heartfelt gratitude, Ms. UN Dalrato, for such an enriching, wonderful workshop. And I think 2 days is not enough for the participants to gain all the knowledge. And I guess if there is any level 2 of this training workshop, kindly permit us to conduct with you that level 2 workshop also for the participants. And you have presented such a enriching 2 days, like such meticulously you have planned and such nice comprehensive, you have given so many things to the participants. And what is the phonics, which is the base for all children, and the teachers, the participants who are attending this, they will definitely use it, and they will definitely use to empower the children and to grow the preschool children and other children with disability also. And I am very unfortunate that I could not attend all your sessions because of our some IQAC meeting in the university level, which I had to attend. Few of just little I have attended. I was really missing. I was thinking that why didn't I attend from the beginning and all. And you have presented both the in a such a multimodal presentation it was, with descriptive explanation, interactive videos, and then all the concepts have been explained in with various examples, and that will really help the participants to imply in their classroom situations. Because and we are committed to prepare competent human capital for both disability and non-disability, for cross-disability, for inclusive education. And I think this workshop will really be very helpful for the participants to take forward their competency in this disability world. And also you have specified like the very beautiful visuals, interactive visuals, which will help the participants to prepare the teaching learning material for indigenous teaching learning material for their group of children. Whichever children they are teaching, they can make a culture free and adapted teaching learning material what they have learned within these 2 days learning. And I guess what Chris Jolly also told about the 20-hour CPD training, if it is possible in the next session, we would request you to give us, enlighten us about that so that we can conduct that also in the next session. And another, I am very heartily thankful to you for like bringing Christopher Jolly also in an inauguration session. Thank you so much, John Dalrato. And we look forward for many more collaborations. And I am seeing in the messages, there are many congratulatory messages are coming, and everybody has benefited from this. Even the faculty of Amity Institute of Rehabilitation Sciences also continuously 2 days they have attended the workshop along with all the participants, students, participants and others. And it is a really learning situation for everybody, and they take it forward for their practice in India with a culture free, adapted phonics training.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's very true what you said, that breaking this down, the next step would be breaking this down into the five forces, spending time on the alternatives in the diagraph, spending time on the tricky words, which I couldn't really fit in today.
yes.
But as you can see, the one thing I want your participants to take away is that you can do this with the minimum of resources. You don't have to spend a lot of money. And with creativity and imagination, you can make your resources that you can have in your toolkit for years. So as I said to you initially, I do not want this to be like a product sales. I'm saying that the products can be there to guide you, but now that you've seen this, you can see how you can source your own products or your own materials to support you. And maybe the teacher's book is a good way. So I'm looking forward to returning. I have enjoyed myself. I'm very passionate about this, as you can see, and I would love to extend it out into a much bigger arena in looking at different aspects. So thank you very, very much. Very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much. And on a weekend also, we have you have utilized your time, and we have troubled you on a weekend. And whole week you will be working, and both the weekend also you have spent for our participants, and really, heartfully we are grateful.
Yes.
And we will look forward for many more collaboration. And you are a wonderful, amazing personality, Miss Yovan Kondalrato, from the last workshop also. And many of the participants in our Amity fraternity, they were so impressed, and they always, we are really grateful to you. Thank you so
I'm
much.
very grateful. And the biggest thing about being human is sharing. And knowledge is not exclusive. It's not exclusive to one person. If I can share it, then this is what we all endeavor to do. And with age, if you have the skills and experience, you want to pass it on to other people, and they will take what you have given them and make it their own. And that is the most empowering thing that any teacher could want to do.
Yes. Disseminating knowledge and sharing the knowledge is great thing, but you have gone above that, and you have made the workshop very interesting with lot of examples, visuals, and it has been very well planned and very wonderful workshop. Thank you so
I hope
much.
so. Thank you
Thank
very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. May I now please invite Dr. Ram Shankar Saxena, Assistant Professor, Amity Institute of Rehabilitation Sciences, to kindly propose the vote of thanks. Dr. Ram Shankar Saxena, please.
Thank you, madam. A very good evening to everybody. On the behalf of Amity Institute of Rehabilitation Sciences, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, I, Dr. Ram Shankar Saxena, Assistant Professor, feel privileged to give the vote of thanks. It was an honor to have an exceptional resource person, Ms. Yvonne Dolretto, at the 2 days prestigious training workshop on Jolly Phonics. The 2 days training has been indeed very enriching. It gave deep insight into the topic and also revealed some interesting facts for practical implementation. Thank you so much, madam, for sparing time and sharing knowledge on such important topic with us. I would wish to place on record my sincere gratitude to our most inspiring and most dynamic and diligent leader, our Honorable Founder President Sir, Chairman AKC Group, Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan Sir. Without his guidance and blessings, this workshop would not have been possible. I would also wish to put forward my sincere regard to our respected Dr. Atul Chauhan Sir, Chancellor, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, and our versatile and eminent Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Valvinder Shukla Madam, who has always been the guiding spirit and driving force, helping us achieve our dreams. I offer my grateful thanks to Professor Dr. Jayanti Pujari, Madam, Director, Amity Institute of Rehabilitation Sciences and Dean Rehabilitation Sciences, and Ms. Pallavi Chauhan, Joint Director, AIRS, for her constant motivation and support in all innovative endeavors of the institution, especially in the planning, organization, and execution of the workshop. On behalf of Amity University and AIRS, I also thank all our esteemed participants for joining us. I also wish to extend my vote of thanks to team of Amity Institute of Rehabilitation Sciences who who have always held their spirit high, and also like to thank the IT department team for their untimely efforts and making this event a success. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. With this, we come to the closing of the 2 days workshop on Jolly Phonics conducted at Amity University, Uttar Pradesh by Amity Institute of Rehabilitation Sciences. Once again, we are thankful to our esteemed resource person, Miss Yvonne, and as said, we look forward to many more collaborations and many more fruitful associations with you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.